Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of Resources and Place Scrutiny Committee. I think we're getting some feedback here. Okay, thank you very much. So welcome everyone to the meeting. Members of the committee present this evening are Councillors Ross McKinnon, Eric Pattenden, Christopher Reid, Richard Sumner. We have Laura Coyle online and we are expecting Councillor Howard Wollaston. Portfolio holders here this evening are Justin Pemberton. Is Justin here with us? No, he's not here. Okay, thank you. And Denise Gaines. And also in attendance, we have Joseph Holmes, Chief Executive, Claire Lawrence, Executive Director for Place, Sarah Clark. Is Sarah coming? No? Okay, thank you. Alex O'Connor, Building Communities Together Team Manager, Nick Caprara, Service Lead for Housing. I'd also like to welcome to the meeting this evening from Thames Valley Police, Berkshire West Local Policing Command, Superintendent Colin Hudson, who covers operations, response and neighbourhoods. And also I would like to welcome this evening from Sovereign Network Group, Jenny Grote, who is Land and New Business Director for the South, Rory Laidlaw, who is Strategic Asset Manager Director, Luke Bingham, Customer and Neighbourhood Director, and Becky Morgan, Regional Director of Localities. Stephen Chard is the clerk for the meeting and Vicky Phoenix is the Zoom host. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin Car Park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. We may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we are always respectful of other people's views. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted? Thank you. Do we have any apologies, please, Mr. Chard?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we do. Apologies have been received from Councillors Jeremy Cottam, Anthony Amataraj and Alan Macron.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 16th of September, to check whether this is a true and accurate record. Are there any comments on this, members? No, I've just got one comment on page 17, penultimate paragraph, where we were talking about the Sports Hub report. It says that the report recommended the executive members shouldn't be able to speak on items at planning committees. But we weren't saying that they shouldn't, because obviously if they're a sponsor of a planning application, they would speak as the sponsor. What the report recommended is they shouldn't be allowed to debate or vote. So whilst I acknowledge that this committee rejected that particular recommendation, I think we just need to make sure that the minutes correctly characterise what the recommendation was. Okay, thank you, members. Any other comments on the minutes? Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wollaston, seconder Councillor Sumner. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Great. Moving on to actions from previous meetings. Do members have any comments on these, please? Okay, got a few. You won't be surprised to hear. Actions 116 and 143. We heard from the Newbury Clayhill Flood and Drainage Warden at the last meeting. Members will recall that we suspended standing orders so that they could speak. I'm conscious that those items initially arose from the special meeting we had with Thames Water and the Environment Agency a year ago, and they have dragged on somewhat. So if members are in agreement, I would like to recommend that we receive a written update for that flood and drainage warden by the Christmas break, just to give them some clarity about what's actually being done with that. I noticed that the document talks about flooding, but it's actually a pollution issue as well. So I think it's reasonable that on their behalf we should ask for a written response, if members are happy with that. Yeah, thank you. Action 237, we haven't heard back from Councillor Cottingham, so I think we need to chase him about that if we can, please. 239, the policy development group, that's actually met a couple of times now, just for people's information. It's talked about viable villages, and there is also due to be a meeting about transformation coming up as well. So that's just for people's information if they're not sure what's happening with that committee. I am still awaiting a response about having a briefing about finances for members of scrutiny and governance. I'm sure the Section 151 officer are extremely busy at the moment, but I think it would be beneficial for us to have an update about the finances if members are in agreement that we proceed, yeah. So I will chase up about that. Yes, Councillor McKinnon.
Chairman, thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Just on item 239, looking at the right-hand column, the transformation PDG's meeting for the first time on the 20th of November. I don't believe that meeting actually took place, so we need that to be updated.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Yeah, that's been postponed. I don't think a date has been chosen for that yet. Thank you for that, Councillor McKinnon. I think we 246. So this is about the task and finish parameters. I'm still waiting for Councillor Vickers, as the chair of one of the other scrutiny committees, to come back to me with some comments on that. And I've said that I don't consider that that's ready to go to corporate board until the chairs of the scrutiny committees have given their feedback. I have heard from Councillor Bowick today. Initially, we decided we needed that piece of work following on from the Sports Hub report. And I think it's important that the members of the scrutiny committees participate in that and that all of those three individuals are heard. So when I hear back from Councillor Vickers, I will share that feedback with legal. Action 247, Councillor McKinnon, did you want to pursue this about the assets? I'm conscious that we have talked about this in the transformation item before, because obviously sale of assets is used to fund transformation. So we could just pursue it through that in the future, should you so wish.
Yeah, happy to do that offline, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Amatharaj is not here, so I'll catch up with him about action 249. Councillor Wollaston, action 250, did you want to pursue that, or would you rather we wrap that up? Oh, okay. It's about Northcroft Lido. You asked some questions about that before. Okay, thank you. And then finally, we had an action 253 to receive the solar farm business case, but I don't believe we've received that yet. So if we could chase that up, Mr. Child, that would be good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm also conscious that we will be adding any recommendations that this committee has accepted and forwarded on to executive also need to be added to this document. So we'll need to do that for the Sports Hub. I think it might be a good idea to look back at the customer services recommendations as well, because they have been sent off to executive and accepted in large part, but we obviously need to keep tabs on that, and I think this would probably be the best committee to do that. We obviously had ones about COVID, which would be for another committee to look at, and also healthcare and new developments would be for another committee to look at. So if members are in agreement, we'll add the Sports Hub and the customer services recommendations to this, and then we can track that in the long term. Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. Item 4, declarations of interest. Any declarations, please, members? Nope. Thank you. Any petitions? I don't think we've had any notifications. Thank you. Great. So moving on to item 6, I'd like to invite Mr. Holmes and Superintendent Hudson to make their presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll start off before handing over in a moment. This has been in your pack, so I'm not going to read it out word for word through the PowerPoint, but we have the West Berkshire Community Safety Partnership. We have a variety of partners who sit on that partnership and looking at a variety of areas from across the activities of all of those different partners, including health, police, fire, as well as our own BCT team as well. We also have probation on there too, and there's a variety of different functions that partnership performs, we've got the legislation here. I'm not proposing to go through the exact legislation and some of the detail behind that, but that is important because we do have to have a community safety partnership of some form, as do all upper tier councils across the country. We did give a slight name change, so it was called the Building Communities Together Partnership. We've gone back to calling it the Community Safety Partnership, which is the sort of standard wording for it. You see on the next page, page 32 of your pack, it sets out some of the objectives there, which again I don't think will be a kind of a huge surprise as you would expect, and as we've come along to this meeting beforehand. But a key part of the meeting that we go through is an update, and not a dissimilar one to one that Superintendent Hudson will go through shortly. But that's a really key part of our focus. And I'm sure, as you would talk about in a minute, there have been some changes to the policing structure, which have meant some of the reporting has changed across the Thames Valley Police area. Should go to the next slide, which is page 33. That just sets out some of the funding grants that have come through. So there are a variety of sort of funding streams that come through. Quite a bit come through the Police and Crime Commissioner, and those are then distributed based through the Community Safety Funding grant to a variety of different organisations to support some of those objectives which sit above. And you see there's a sort of variety of different schemes that have been put in place. Quite a lot around sort of youth offending prevention work is quite a significant amount of the grant and the work of the partnership as a whole. If we go to the next slide, there's just a summary there, which again Superintendent Hudson might speak a little bit more around the sort of Safer Streets fund there up at the Nightingales. And then on to the next slide, which is the last one that I'll quickly go through, which is on slide, it's page 35 of the pack. This is just some of the then schemes that more publicly that you might see are some of the outcomes through the Community Safety Partnership. Sorry, Chair. Just to go to the clerk, it's probably page 31, probably of the pack in there, so that the slides tally what I'm saying. If you go back a few more slides, it's the one that one more. That's the one. So this sets out some of the things which I suppose publicly you will see are some of the work of the partnership, and perhaps one of the most public ones there is the sort of public spaces protection orders. So we've seen a new one go in Pangbourne Meadows over the summer this year, as well as in Newbury and Thatcham Town Centre. Also some of the Ask Angela work that has taken place here and both nationally as well. So that's some of the more sort of visible public pieces of work that takes place. I don't know, Alex, if there's anything else you wanted to add beyond that? Okay.
Thank you very much. Superintendent Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Next slide, please. So firstly, we'll talk a little bit about domestic abuse. You can see the figures which compare this year to last year in front of you. So comparing those 2 years, we have seen a slight increase in the number of domestic abuse incidents that we're recording, and I've seen a corresponding increase in the outcomes, and the outcomes is the number of successful criminal justice results that we get for that for those incidents. If we looked a bit further back in history to put that into some context, so we're seeing, as you can see there, about 1,600 recorded incidents in this area per year. Last year we saw just over 1,400, so we've got that slight increase. However, the year before that we saw 2,000. So the long-term picture is that of a steady reduction, notwithstanding any increases, obviously not what we would like to see. But long-term, I think we're doing reasonably well in this area. If we look at domestic abuse and the nature of domestic abuse, half of what we call domestic abuse is what we call non-crime, so where we've attended a reported incident and no crimes have been detected. So, for example, you might have somebody phone in saying there's shouting coming from next door, police attend, and those inside say, no, we're just having a bit of an argument, there's nothing gone on there. So half of our recorded incidents of that sort of nature. That's not seeking to minimise it, it's just seeking to give you some context about the overall picture. and 90% of all our recorded incidents result in no injury. I'm glad to say that in West Berkshire in particular, we have one of the highest arrest rates for domestic abuse in the force at 75% or thereabouts, which I think is comparable to previous years. But the increase that we've seen for this year, we've done some initial analysis on. I think some further work will be required by the Domestic Abuse Board, which is a subgroup of the CSP. And we'll talk a little bit, I think, when we come to the challenges facing the CSP and policing about analytical capacity. I know Alex will recognise that as a concern that faces the CSP. But some of that, we are seeing, I think, an increase in domestic abuse where it's not necessarily the traditional partner-on-partner scenario. It may be siblings, parents, sometimes children versus parents, and a little bit vice versa. That's not just being seen here, that's being seen in other areas as well. I think potentially as a result of some of those changes in society where children may be staying with their parents longer, there's probably an increase in families living together for a bit longer due to the cost of living pressures that we're seeing in the wider society. But we do need a bit more exploratory work on that. In terms of how we respond to the challenge of domestic abuse, I think, again, I've seen quite a change in I've been with Thames Valley Police for 9 years. I've seen a greatly increased focus on domestic abuse, which is one of the reasons that arrest rate is so high. So, you know, every domestic abuse incident that gets reported to us, 3/4 of them in West Berkshire will get an officer or officers attending. It's not possible to always attend every incident because quite a lot of them get reported to us, we would call them historical. So they're not ongoing, it's after the fact, if you see what I mean. But our approach involves increased use of powers. So many of you may be familiar with domestic violence protection notices and orders, which is an order that a magistrate can grant for a particular case where maybe it's one of those non-crime cases, or it's a case where there's no evidence that we could use to progress the case along the criminal justice route. And that places conditions upon, I have to be careful, the alleged perpetrator, because we've got no evidence that they're still alleged. But it also gives us some powers to arrest them if they're in breach of those conditions, and it can give the victims a bit of space, a bit of time. We can exclude the alleged perpetrator from the address for a bit, and it can help them seek support by other means. And in West Berkshire in particular, over this last year, we've seen the biggest increase in use of those powers across the force, double the nearest other areas. So I think 42% increase in using those powers. We've also introduced in our policing day, one of the core elements of our day is what we call the daily management meeting, where we review major incidents that have happened over the course of the last 24 hours. And we make sure that the right people are doing the right things and going in the right direction with those investigations and our policing response. We also have now a daily, what we call a GRIP meeting, which is a very policing term for, again, just making sure that those incidents are going in the right direction. And that is dedicated to domestic abuse. Part of the recent restructure that we've had in Thames Valley Police has introduced something called the Harm Reduction Unit, which consists of specialist detective resources that are more familiar with how to manage investigations into domestic abuse. They have a little bit of extra training in how to deal with the sensitive area of victim engagement, which is one of the biggest factors in whether we can progress with these cases. And that daily GRIP meeting is producing some really good results. I think partially the increase in our use of the domestic violence protection orders is due to that, and it continues to help us address the challenges that we have in our workforce, which is dealing with a different generation of younger officers who are used to interacting in very different ways, far more around social media, interacting via technology and online, as they are dealing with things face to face, which does present us with some issues. Thank you. Next, please. So serious violence then. So we term serious violence as anything with more than actual bodily harm, so relatively low level of injury, but we still call that serious violence. And as many of you will be aware, West Berkshire is one of the safest parts of the country for that. The overall picture on serious violence remains relatively static, very close to last year, which was, as I've looked back in history, quite close to the year before. That long term, I think if we look at the changes in the crime patterns across most areas, and West Berkshire would be no exception, we are by and large seeing a reduction in slightly less serious violent offences with occasional more serious ones. They're few and far between in West Berkshire, I'm very glad to say, as we will talk about. But overall, we are seeing reductions in some areas, such as some violent crime. We're seeing reductions in things like acquisitive crime and vehicle crime, but we're seeing an increase in things like antisocial behaviour, particularly, and frauds and things, especially things that are facilitated by social media and the online world. But serious violence, I say, similar levels to last year, slight increase in the criminal justice outcomes we've been achieving on that, and clearly violence on the streets is one of the key parts of our local policing, and our main priorities. We have three main local policing priorities. One of those is respond quickly, which clearly is one of the key elements when you're talking about serious violence. Thank you. Next slide, please. So knife crime. This one's a bit more tricky to understand in terms of the long term, because what I've found in preparing for this meeting, when looking back at previous years, is that the crime that we've got recorded for last year is different to the crime that we've got recorded this year for last year. And the reason I've discovered for that is that the incidents get tidied up. There's duplicates in there. We're probably doing a bit of over recording with respect to knife crime. So if not necessarily over crime, but if we record it as a knife crime, if a knife is mentioned anywhere. So for example, we are recording if somebody is on social media and threatens to, stab somebody or whatever, or in incidents of antisocial behaviour, that gets recorded too. So that we are, quite a lot of that gets worked through the system as we go through. People scrutinise the incidents and remove the duplicates and that sort of thing. But in terms of knife crime, what we're seeing at the moment is a slight increase in terms of numbers, significant in terms of percentages, but of course they're low numbers. We have done some analysis on that, and the main reason is recording of the presence of or the mention of a knife in incidents that may not immediately appear as what you would think of as a knife crime. And there are also features in there, because it's low numbers, numbers associated with a particular individual who was found in possession with a knife and had several crimes recorded against their name. I'm glad to say that individual is now in prison. I think that's pretty much it for knife crime, unless there's any issues, questions. Okay, so on to stop and search here. So I think the long term, lots of controversy around this subject, and no doubt we'll see some questions. In terms of the longer term picture on stop and search, it's been a very difficult power for police to operate with in the wider context. If we recall, several years ago, stop and search was seen as a very controversial power, one that should be avoided perhaps. However, I think the overall context in society has seen stop and search as a useful tool for police to use to be able to act on suspicion, intelligence or information. And of course, we've just been talking about knife crime, and one of the things that we do search for is obviously weapons, that we do, I think, have a responsibility to act on that information intelligence where it's there. So long term, the volumes of stop and search have been pretty static, generally more recently increasing. These figures are, and as we'll probably talk about when we talk about data and capacity, these figures are not for West Berkshire specifically. They are for our what we call the local command unit, which covers Newbury, Wokingham and Reading. However, I've managed to have a bit of a look into the figures, and I think roughly 10% of that would be specific to West Berkshire. One of the areas that we are improving on, I think, is our outcome rate, which would mean when we've said we're going to look for something, we've got some information or intelligence or suspicion that we're going to look for a weapon or drugs, that we find it. So if we look back long term, that positive outcome rate would be something like 20%, and it's now more up towards 30%. And West Berkshire's very successful at that, and we are doing better. When we talk about protected characteristics and the proportionality or disproportionality of who is being searched, so that disproportionality is the proportion of police searches for a particular group. So let's say Asians, the Asian ethnicity group, compared to the proportion of that group in the local population according to the 2021 census data. And then it is normalised versus the white population from the census data, which itself, I don't think searches of the white population is proportionate to the actual census population, but nevertheless, all of the other groups are normalised to that one. You can see there, so ethnic minorities 1.4, so a value of 1 would be the same proportion as white. So when it's higher than 1, it's more, there is a greater proportion of searches of people from that group than is in the census data. So ethnic minorities 1.4, black 3.7, which is clearly the outlier here. Asian 0.8, mixed 1.2, and other 1.3. In terms of ages and genders, I mean, the biggest disproportionality is without doubt gender, for the vast majority of the subjects of our searches being male, and the vast majority of those males being in the age bracket of 18 to 34, which is probably not a surprise to people within this room. In terms of how we manage that and ensure that we're getting things right. So stop and search encounters, as many police encounters are these days, it won't surprise you to find are recorded on body-worn video. Those body-worn videos are reviewed both by us, and we also have a system in place where independent scrutiny is applied to those body-worn videos of those encounters, specifically those which might be from the communities which feel there's disproportionate police interest. Body-worn video, in my view, I think is extremely helpful with this, and the feedback that we generally get is, by and large, most of the disproportionality, or should I say, racist behaviour is directed by members of the public at police officers, and we have seen an increase in our officers from minorities being on the end of that abuse, which is sad to see, but we do support them. That's it for stop and search. Thank you. Violence against women and girls. So I think we're seeing, I can't quite see the screen there, it's a bit small for me. Yeah, we've seen a slight increase in the volume here, and it is a small number, it's about 20 or so incidents over the year. And we've also seen, is that right? Yes, that's right. Sorry. I've had to start wearing glasses, you see. Yeah, we've seen a slight increase in the volume, and we've seen a slight increase in the outcomes, which are pretty proportionate in terms of the volume. In terms of what that was like the year before, so that slight increase is coming off a larger drop from 2023 to 24, where we saw a 14% drop in incidents, and our outcome rate remains pretty stable. I've already mentioned at the moment victim engagement being one of the main challenges in dealing with incidents like this. One of the other ones I think that faces us, particularly in sort of licensed premises and town centre nighttime economy type scenarios, is support from licensed premises, access to that CCTV, which can provide us with evidence that we can move forward with in an investigation. Many of you may be familiar with some of the tactics that we use in this area, such as op vigilance, where we have specially trained officers who can detect concerning behaviour amongst individuals in things like nighttime economy scenarios. They can intervene before anything untoward happens, deal with those individuals before they have the chance to do what they might be seeking to do. That's deployed in nighttime economies in Reading, in Newbury, and in events at the racecourse here in Newbury, and for large events that that happen in Thames Valley as well, such as Ascot. I was the Silver Commander last year for Royal Ascot, and I've seen, I believe, to be one of the a real step change in the professionalism of our op vigilant deployments. They're integrating far better with our everyday, for want of a better term, policing units in the way that they communicate, the way that they identify individuals and deal with them. So I'm confident that that is here to stay, and the Home Office have recently visited us as well as one of the leading areas for deploying that kind of tactic. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Right, I'll move there. Antisocial behaviour. So this is an area where we are seeing an increase in volume. Again, similar to domestic abuse, we have the concept here of crime antisocial behaviour and not crime antisocial behaviour. Again, similarly, not crime is what it sounds like. It's when we attend and we look at an incident and no crimes are disclosed. But we still have responded to and investigated that incident and conducted an initial investigation. There have been quite a lot of changes in the way that antisocial behaviour is recorded and managed in Thames Valley this year, probably the biggest change that I've seen in the last decade. We are recording far more than we used to, and that is due to all antisocial behaviour incidents, whereas before they may have been recorded and put in the database, assessed for their importance, and then put into the crime figures. Now, all of those reports now make their way to the neighbourhood teams who are familiar with that area, and they get a full review. And there is also the neighbourhood guarantee in place, which may be familiar to you, where we have a responsibility to respond within 72 hours. So the results of that are, it's quite a big change in the way that our local teams are working, although we're still working out the right way to deal with that. But antisocial behaviour, there's no doubt in my mind that we're recording more of what exists out there. Whether there's more going on out there or not, I think is tricky to judge. But if we look at other forms of, let's say, crimes and incidents that police record indicating general behaviour of the public, such as public order incidents, such as hate crimes, we are seeing a bit of an increase there as well. So I think perhaps we have a civility issue as a society as a whole, because we're certainly starting to see more of that. Maybe the cost of living coming to bite as well. To counter that, we've increased the use of our powers, such as closure orders, community protection notices, dispersals, CBOs, although CBOs are quite a high level power where you have to have a conviction. This next slide, please. Sorry, my apologies. So we're increasing the use of our powers. We also have radically revised the way that we patrol and record our patrols. We're much better at identifying and patrolling hotspots than we ever have been, certainly in my time. And that continues, and West Berkshire is no exception to that. Thank you. Next slide, please. We're on to the neighbourhood and policing guarantee, which I've mentioned a couple of times. So many of you will be aware of the Safer Streets initiative that took place over the summer. This presents some of the results from that at what we would say is the LCU level for the month of July. Berks West is ours, and we're leading the way in terms of arrests. We're certainly doing a good job with seizing those pesky e-scooters as well. And I've had done a bit of a dig into what we've done more locally, and I'll provide you some of the highlights of that now. So in terms of what's happened in West Berkshire specifically, we've had 12 days of action for op purchase over the entire summer, which is our retail crime targeted operation. And we've had 20 hotspot patrol operations. We've had 24 engagement events, 13 operations targeting e-scooters and e-bikes, 26 operations targeting antisocial behaviour, which probably is one of the main areas that we've been focusing on. 3 licensing operations, 2 operations at local transport hubs, and 4 days of action for rural crime. As I said earlier, we've deployed Vigilant, and we've also deployed Observator, which is guided by behavioural science, where we look for hostile reconnaissance, which effectively we're looking for. We have uniformed police and plainclothes police. We use the uniformed police to trigger a response in individuals who are seeking to do something naughty, and the non-uniformed police are trained to spot their reaction to the presence of the uniform, and then we can separate them off and have a word with them and see who they are and what they're up to. We've done a lot, I think, in the town centre with regards to shoplifting and retail. I think historically, if we think back, that shoplifting was often perceived as not a priority. That's certainly no longer the case. It's definitely a very high priority now. So we are seeing increases in our records of shoplifting, but the numbers of outcomes that we're getting for shoplifting is hugely increased. Thank you. So future challenges, probably a slight change from the slides. Many of you will have be aware of the recent news and announcement on police and crime commissioners. So I think that will be a challenge for policing and local authorities and CSPs over the next couple of years. So my concerns around that are, well, certainly the governance arrangements will need to be put in place. I don't have too many concerns around that. However, as Alex will attest, the PCC's office has been one of the key authorities in granting funding. I would not want to see the funding that's available to West Berkshire reduced as a result of these changes. Quite a lot of policing functions that were handled within Thames Valley Police have historically been moved to the PCC's office, and when the government talks about savings, I would want to ensure that those functions that keep delivering for our communities we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, to coin a phrase, and that we retain those functions as well as the funding. And in the interim, of course, I'm concerned that all of the things that the police and crime commission officers do is going to be done in the knowledge that they will no longer be there. So I assure you we'll be keeping an eye on that and making sure that things are still operating effectively. In terms of our local policing challenge in relation to our LCU structures, I've talked about the harm reduction unit and some of the positive impacts that's having on our response to domestic abuse. So that's a positive. There are some cost savings that were associated with that that structural change, and one of the main ones of those is the amount of capacity that we have to support analytical work, looking at crime trends, looking at root causes of issues. It's a constant challenge, and Alex and I will have been and will continue to talk about ways of tackling that. I think we're looking at the moment whether we can pool resources with other areas and bring a little bit more capacity to bear for the benefit of the CESP. Civil unrest, I think misinformation is my specific concern, and how that can potentially drive not necessarily civil unrest on a large scale, but individual pockets of concern. We live in a very different world to the one I grew up in, certainly, where, I mean, literally a couple of weeks ago, I was silvering a knife incident in Reading, so overseeing the command of that and talking to the force control room, the duty inspectors, and making sure suspects were identified and controlled, making sure victims were receiving the care that they needed. And whilst doing this, I am receiving phone calls from the local authority because they'd seen it on social media, and we are talking minutes, if not seconds, those calls came in. So that's the world we live in, and my concern around that is misinformation, getting the truth out there, and what the voice of local authorities and police can be to settle what we often see, which is misinformation. I think the other concern I've flagged on here, I've spoken about in terms of how that antisocial behaviour demand is managed, and also I've mentioned the challenges that we face around training our workforce to do things that require perhaps communication skills that they might not have developed in the same way that they might have done over previous years, such as face-to-face communication with vulnerable victims when we're considering domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. So our workforce remains, as you would expect, a continuing challenge. and one I will be prioritising. Thank you. Believe that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Alex, did you want to add anything to what's been said? No. Okay. Right. Thank you very much indeed for your presentations. Members, Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. Massive amount of information there. Thank you both for everything that you provided. Chair, I was privileged to have building communities together as my first portfolio on the executive way back when. I noticed the branding is still on the documentation, and though the name might have changed, it actually gives me great pleasure to see that on there because I think it's still central to everything that happens. And I'm acutely aware of the volume of work, especially teamwork, that goes on within the area. Long may that continue, because it over the number of years that I have known about it, and since I picked it up from Councillor Marcus Franks, I think it's absolutely crucial to the authority and the residents and people that come and visit our area that work continues. I've got a few questions. If I can just lob them all over and then you can come back to me. And if you've given the answer to any of these in your presentation, please forgive me. There was just so much information in there. Positive outcomes was mentioned. What extent is positive is probably my first point of clarity on that one. Is it purely within the remit of TVP? And to follow that up, you mentioned a 75% arrest rate, which I think sounds to me to be exceptionally good, actually. From memory, certainly, I think it's right up there in the success rates. But is that supported by the court system? So, sort of linked to the previous question, your success and the residents' success for the district may not be one and the same, and I would understand them being different. But if we could have some clarity on that. You mentioned towards the end of the presentation there about asylum issues, and I'd already written down a question, but that sort of supports it, which is that in your categorisation, is white anything outside of the global majority? Because with asylum seekers, with nationals coming over from Europe, the category of white isn't necessarily it's not necessarily one thing that everybody would agree on, I suspect. So are we talking white British or are we talking white generally? Because it feels like there's a potential movement within that. And it's important, and I have referred to it as a global majority because that is, as we currently understand it, the phrasing that we use. And finally, within the violence against women and girls, is that a category which is strictly defined by male against female? Or is there actually female against female that's within that would still drive through the same sort of end results as far as figures are concerned? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so positive outcomes and the police's place in the overall criminal justice system. So we would count a positive outcome in the discussions that we've been having today as the getting to the point of a charge. So it doesn't necessarily include the results of what's happened at court, if anything. And the question around arrest rates and whether that's supported by the court system is a tricky one to answer. I think overall we do find the relationship with the CPS can be tricky. Lots of work goes on. We have a good relationship with many of the more senior members of the CPS at the management level, but local relationships can vary sort of case by case basis, and we often feel that we're having to meet a very high threshold of investigation quality, cover all of the points of the proof, and do a very, very complete investigation in order to meet the threshold of what would constitute being in the public interest for a charge. That puts a lot of pressure on our officers, more workload on our officers to make sure that they've covered every base, disclosed all of the evidence, and digital evidence is a problem in itself because of the volume and the quantity of it. So there's huge challenges at that kind of interface at the investigation level. I would suggest that's probably where we have an issue, because that's where the capacity doesn't necessarily always meet the demand. I hope that's answered your question on that front. In terms of the categorization for stop and search, now I'll have to take that one away and check the details of what's recorded. I believe it's the self-defined ethnicity of the person that we are talking about here, which may be different to what the census data is, but nevertheless, if that person counts themselves as white or indeed anything else, that's what we would have been talking about today, I think. And then in terms of the violence against women and girls, the majority of the offenders are male, but we're not recording only when it's male. We record all where the victim is female, but unfortunately, and I think it's White Ribbon Week for those of you that are familiar with the White Ribbon Initiative, which is men being advocates for women and to stand up and speak out against violence against women and girls. That's why that's so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. And again, it was great to hear all the detail on how that was put together. Many of us councillors look after rural wards, and obviously there's a lot of concern about rural crime. Some of us attended the rural crime conference that was in May at Shaw House, and we had Chief Superintendent Felicity Parker and Rural Crime Task Force Inspector Stuart Hutchins there. I was just wondering how we're looping in this with rural crime as well. Is there sort of communications between? Do we define anything that might be regarded as urban or rural crime? How do we have that aspect brought to the surface?
Major. So the primary way that we deal with rural crime is by a normal response, and we have a local process we call it TTCG, which is a tasking coordination group. It's very partner focused. We have representatives from the CSP, from health, who come together and talk about local issues in the community and prioritise activities over that period. And one of the main features of those meetings has been making sure that rural crime is reflected as a priority. So we've had over the last summer several rural crime spots in West Berkshire prioritised for police attendance. So we will have hotspot patrols in those areas. Some of those engagement events that I talked about when I was giving a summary of the safer streets were taking place in rural areas. I've got a breakdown. I haven't got it with me, but I can get a breakdown of what's happened within West Berkshire and where they've all happened. And we've had specific rural crime events as well. So one thing I'm really keen on, I believe rural crime is probably underreported, and if you think about the challenges I've mentioned cost of living several times this evening. If you think about the challenge that are facing some rural communities and farming, although lots of those crimes, they may be insured, they may have, they are often acquisitive crimes. There's sometimes issues with damage to land, etc. But there's often a financial cost that's associated with them, which is quite significant, and more significant than you would find in many other types of our sort of lower level acquisitive crimes, such as shoplifting. So there's no doubt in my mind that it's of great impact, and we will continue to make sure that features in our regular meetings with partners, and that we prioritise our policing resources towards it appropriately. Notwithstanding all of the other issues that we've talked about tonight, there are many priorities facing us, but our local neighbourhood inspector, Al Hawkett, is extremely good at representing, I would say, the concerns of community. And he and I have a very close working relationship, and I do value his professional opinion, and he will flag those issues and we will respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you. Firstly, just regarding the numbers in the charts, Superintendent, I think it might be useful if the numbers were also shown for, incidents per 100,000 or, I don't know, 10,000 of population or something, just in order to do comparisons with areas. Is that, I mean, I'm not asking for that now, but, in future, I think that might be a useful figure to have if possible. But I'm particularly interested in the safer streets and the Nightingales, and whether that initiative is carrying on and potentially being extended to other areas, because there are other areas of where there are problems in West Berkshire, and I think that would be a useful thing if it could be carried on. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of figures for per head of population or whatever, so West Berkshire will typically be in the top quarter in terms of being the safest and all the lowest crime areas in the majority of those cases. Are the tools that we use generally don't operate on that level, but there are lots of tools in the public domain that do, such as iQuanta and some of the local government association databases. So that's something we'll take away, and I'll discuss with Alex when we're having our conversations around data, because as I mentioned, one of the big problems that we've got is capacity to produce that sort of thing. So we've got very limited crime analyst capacity. As you would expect, their priorities are very clearly scrutinised to make sure that they are focusing on the right things. And quite often they will be analysing things that have a close to a operational impact and are preventing harm. So I definitely take your feedback. I think we'll look at what we can do for next time using some of those public domain tools, because I think the public domain tools will provide most of what's required. And in terms of the Nightingales, do you have an update on that, Alex?
Thank you, Chair. So the Safer Streets project was funded by the Home Office. So that round was obviously Fund 5. So that was the 5th round, and that was the first time that West Berkshire was actually able to apply for grant money, because we just did not fit any of the criteria before that the government laid out on its round. So it would depend on if they do a Fund 6 on how that looks, and if it's applicable that West Berkshire can actually apply for it. Although the actual funding has finished, the work up at the Nightingales continues, and the partnership that was built up there is really strong. And actually, we had a meeting last week, so that's ongoing. And that's not to say that work is not reflected elsewhere. So if other issues were to come up in another area, there is nothing to say that, and we have done it before, that a similar partnership approach would not be taken. It's just that thankfully through that funding we had funding, so we were able to put CCTV in, we were able to have additional hours from Berkshire Youth, we were able to do clean-up days, which wouldn't have been possible without the funding. So the partnership work can carry on, but actually what the Nightingale saw did rely a bit on that funding. But I will keep my eyes out for the next round to see if we can apply for it. But again, that's something as well that may come through via the OPCC if we're lucky. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chair. BCT currently comes under my shadow portfolio, and I was also on the Police and Crime Commissioners panel for about 2 years. I'm concerned about your funding with the demise of the PCC. Is it like to go under the new mayoralty? Because I'm concerned if it goes to councils, as has been talked about in the press. Which councils? That's another. If we stop, my other concern I'd like to see possible is I'm a member for Lambourne, and drugs is a big issue, and it's not really mentioned in here at all.
Mr. Holmes, do you want to come back on the first question?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. So under the proposals with the abolition of the OPCC, that would be abolished in 2 years' time, so 2028. for those areas that do have a mayor, those powers will transfer across to the mayor. On Thursday evening, in here, there is the expression of interest for a sort of Thames Valley mayor coming in front of members. So that could or could not be in place by then. That is out of our control. If there's not a mayoral authority there, we'll most likely revert to something, the system that we had in place before the OPCC came into existence. So something Thames Valley wide with levels of sort of local accountability, but a similar setup that we had there with, I've forgotten exactly, I don't know if I can remember the actual name of the police boards that we used to have that had representation from those councils across the whole of the respective police area. But it'd be very likely that it would go like to an individual council area like West Berkshire. That wouldn't happen.
Thank you.
I think it was police authorities, wasn't it? Yeah, they still have them in Scotland. They didn't go for PCCs. Yeah, I don't think I have any further information than anybody else in this room about how the PCC's governance arrangements and funding will proceed. But I've outlined my concerns. I think they're probably in common with yours. I'll do everything in my power to make sure that it doesn't adversely affect the funding for West Berkshire, and that we don't, as I said earlier, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I give you my assurance that I'll do everything that I can to keep an eye on that one and influence appropriately. On the drugs, so good spot. What I would say is for stop and search, the vast majority of those we're looking for drugs. There are some weapons and some stolen property, but the vast majority is drugs. If you recall, I said that historically it had been a difficult power, but it's on the increase, and the outcome rates are vastly improved. So we are searching for drugs more often, and we're finding them more often. In terms of our outcomes for drugs, so the number of prosecutions that we're getting, I think in West Berkshire that's up about 10%. And that's for dealers as well. So we are focusing on that. I agree with you. It's a common feature across so much offending.
Thank you. I should say as well, thank you for a very good presentation.
Alex, did you want to come back on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to advise Councillor Williston that I think you were at the CSP meeting, was it earlier last week, that Lambourne was mentioned specifically, and I know my colleague Sue Butterworth has made a note of your name to contact you with regarding Lambourne, because it is something that we need to progress, and we are aware of the issues out there. So somebody from my team will be in touch with you about that meeting that we're looking to set up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Superintendent, one of the things that I do get contacted a lot, and it can be as a member, is antisocial behaviour, where it's quite low level, but it's continuous and it's grinding the residents down. And it can be neighbours taking drugs and you can clearly smell it. Or it can be things where they feel intimidated or harassed because it's repeated complaints about the same thing, but in a quite aggressive manner. Or even neighbours with CCTV pointed into their the back gardens, or having photographs taken of them. I do wonder, I think that's something where obviously the police can work with a local authority. Is that something that could be better funded? Because I do feel there's often residents do feel like they're left alone. They report it to the police, but it's constant, it's ongoing. And often they're coming back to me 2, 3, 4 months later, still saying it's still happening. You know, they got a visit from the PCS, the local police officer, but nothing else has really happened.
Yeah, those types of scenarios where the threshold is quite low on the harm, and yet it can be prolonged, are something that I think it's traditionally been quite difficult police on their own. And I think my professional opinion would be that if you actually look at the legislation, those things are not always so well defined and to give us the clarity of the power that we can use address it. So where it is clearer is things like stalking and harassment when there's a clear course of conduct, but antisocial behaviour doesn't have the same level of rigour around the definition, allowing us to go, well, that is now a course of conduct with antisocial behaviour. So politically, I feel there's potentially something that could be encouraged there to look at the impact of it. But that does leave us, I think, in a space where we do have opportunities to work more closely with partners. I'll explore that with you, Alex. Thank you.
And just to build on Councillor Reid's question, I'm conscious that sometimes councillors have intractable issues around antisocial behaviour, which can go on sometimes for years. I wonder, is it possible to have a contact for the police to whom councillors could go if they feel they need to escalate something, just because of how long it's been going on for, to try and get a more senior officer's input into it?
Of course.
Yeah, that'd be great. Would that be yourself, do you think, Superintendent? Or okay, great. So if we get your contact details, I think that would be very useful. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't be seeking to, contact you every day with everything, but I think there are some examples. There are some, I know of at least one in my ward that's gone on for 4 years now. And I think that, that would be worthy of trying to draw that to a close.
And we do, I mean, this already does happen, but and you mentioned it to me earlier on, that there may be a follow-up meeting where we can discuss that.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Superintendent. Any other questions from colleagues? No? Okay. I'd quite like to ask, bearing in mind this is a partnership, I'd be interested to hear from each of the stakeholders in that partnership. What do you think we should be doing more of in the future to work together? How could we improve that partnership, do we think? Who wants to go first? Mr. Holmes.
I'll go first. Thank you, Chair. And welcome that. I think the key thing for me is sharing information and data. I think is really important, and also is providing focus. And actually, we only had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, actually looking at something the government started, a very previous government over 15 years ago, around total place, which was the concept of so looking at either a specific area or an area like West Berkshire, how much all of the partners put in, how much expenditure there is across the whole of that area, and then focusing specifically on what can we do better as a group of partners, and maybe looking at specific areas. So actually, both colleagues have highlighted specific work, say, happening with the Nightingales, and I think there's other areas, Councillor Williston mentioned Lambourne, around where actually we can focus rather than overarching themes actually on locality areas. So I think for me, I see that as a big opportunity for us working more collaboratively together on that.
Thank you. Superintendent, do you have any reflections on that?
I think, policing is very rich in data. How much information is in that data is open to debate. And of course, by the time it's come to police's attention, it's far too late. That, if we think about domestic abuse, those relationships have been going along that route for many years before anybody calls us in some cases. So sharing information is absolutely key. And I think a bit of a better understanding of what information that we've got, not just in the policing realm, but in the aligned areas from different partners, could really help understand what the root causes are. That's one thing from me. And I've already mentioned the capacity for crime analysts. It's not necessarily just crime, but antisocial behaviour and lots of different. We recognise that's an issue, and that is something that we are actively discussing.
Alex, did you have anything to add?
No, I would agree with Joseph on the information and looking locality wise, because I think we can do more work if we concentrate on an area rather than scattering across and not doing a lot. Is focusing on the key things where we can make a difference, and also not engaging partners, because partners are engaged, but actually encouraging partners to become more involved, because a lot of the work is driven through the BCT team and colleagues that we have in the police. There's other partners that sit around the table that it will be really good just to see them working a bit more closely with us. It's there, but I think it just needs to be encouraged a bit more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those insights. So Lawrence, did you want to say anything about this? No, okay. It's quite interesting about the funding, because I'm conscious that there might be people in the public who think it's a good thing to get rid of the police and crime commissioners because they might perceive it as a waste of money and think, well, the police can do their job without needing someone elected above them. But your point, I think, was very interesting about how there is money associated with that role that used to sit somewhere else, and you don't want to see that disappear when that role disappears. And Mr. Holmes mentioned about the new mayor, but, you know, might there be a gap between the police and crime commissioner disappearing and maybe the mayoral situation coming in? I wonder if there's a piece of work we ought to do about lobbying to ensure that that money is not lost to the police service. Would that be something that we might usefully do?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that would be useful. I think perhaps once it's a bit clearer what some of the government's intent is here, but I think is a very fair risk. And you see some of the announcements, for example, made today around mayoral authorities being able to have a tourist levy. You can see that in the mayoral areas, additional powers exist and often different funding opportunities exist. And those areas that don't have a mayor, potentially, and the future of the Police and Crime Commissioner could be one of those where there's a differential approach. But we don't know that yet. So I think we need to see what the government's approach is. You can clearly see that the push is towards having a mayor fulfilling this function.
Thank you very much for that. Any recommendations, colleagues, that we think would be useful to make? No. Okay, well, that was extremely useful. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I think this is a really useful item that we have each year. And I know that councillors are very grateful for the support that you give us in our community. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, you are free to leave unless you want to stay for the subsequent items. Great. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. Item 7, options for improving affordable housing delivery. We have Councillor Denise Gaines with us this evening, who's the portfolio holder of housing, and Nick Caprara, one of our officers, to present their report. And then we have 4 guests with us this evening from Sovereign Network Group, who will also make a presentation, and then we will open it up to questions. Over to you, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. According to Shelter, the original purpose of social housing was to provide people with the stability of a decent, safe, secure, and genuinely affordable home. That's still, I think, or still I believe, to be the case today. They further said, in the 1960s, nearly a third of households lived in social housing. People from all walks of society could be sure that if they needed it, they could get a decent, permanent home that they could afford. That is not so true today. West Berkshire is an area of high property prices and high land value. We also have 73% of the area that is national landscape, which also limits development opportunities. As a result, many local people have a great difficulty gaining access to housing on the open market that actually meets their needs. Affordable housing provision is therefore a priority. Having a safe, secure place to call home has much wider implications as it can affect the health, education and employment opportunities for those families struggling to find such a home. The affordable housing need was assessed again in July 2022 with the updated housing need evidence. That evidence showed a high need for affordable housing right across our district. So theoretically, there is theoretical evidence, but we see the real families coming to the council every day in need of affordable housing. We currently have 1,300 applications for social housing on our register. Not all of those families are in dire need, but some are. But apart from the land value and the land scarcity, there are other barriers to supply of affordable homes. 4.15 in the report gives a flavour of the issues that have arisen here in West Berkshire. Registered providers having to improve and retrofit existing stock to meet the decent home standards, Viability issues with developers facing increased and increasing construction costs, material shortages and shortage of skilled labour force. Registered providers not willing to invest in small developments due to economies of scale. Agreement issues between developers and registered providers on housing specification. RPs needing to future-proof their acquisitions in anticipation of building regulation changes. There are no such things, no such requirements for build to sell on the open market. S106 legal agreement restrictions. Developers and RPs are looking for more flexibility in those agreements to meet their needs on specific sites, recently resulting in developers unable to secure an RP to partner on the affordable housing element of a site. That has happened several times quite recently. So to future opportunities for delivery of more affordable homes. Over and above our current work, developing a framework across a wider geographical area is a possible opportunity, working with key stakeholders, including health, registered providers and our local MPs. This is currently the Berkshire Prosperity Board and its subcommittees, although there are other things in the pipeline. Emerging local government reorganisation. This could be a possible solution, enabling partnerships with other Ridgeway councils, one of which has a housing association already. So we should probably get we could possibly get government funding for that. Variations of F106 agreements. These agreements are linked to planning permission and can also be known as planning obligations. S106 agreements are drafted when it's considered that a development will have a significant impact on the local area that cannot be moderated by means of conditions attached to a planning decision. I appreciate that most people here know that, not necessarily anybody out there that's listening may not know that. So there is a need to vary these agreements when developers' sites struggle to be met viability thresholds, or to explore changes to tenure, that's the type and mixtures of housing on a particular site. However, any variation to these agreements must have robust evidence that all workable solutions have already been explored. Para 4.20 of the report gives more details. Para 4.21 mentions commuted sums. This is accepting a monetary value instead of the housing delivery. Traditionally, the council's position has been to retain delivery of affordable homes on site. We have taken this position and have been mostly successful in securing this position. As a result, commuted sums to offset affordable home delivery are not routine. However, a possible option would be to accept more commuted sums and utilise those funds in the delivery of homes elsewhere. We also have the local MP on the Housing Select Committee, and we have an agreed number of actions, which we had a meeting with him recently and had an agreed number of actions, again detailed at 4.23, that he will take back to the committee, including a request to meet the Housing Minister. Having said all the above, we have a target of 1,000 affordable homes by 2030, and we have reached 538 up to Q2 since 2023. The attached circular slide, are we going to put the slide up, Mr. Nard? The attached circular slide today gives the various types of affordable homes achieved over the past 5 years, some in more imaginative ways than the usual route. Those imaginative ways we negotiated for a development that was purchased at Stirling Gardens, and now we have 100% affordable houses and apartments on that site. We have had planning application for 2 further sites, which are also 100% affordable, which received planning permission recently. And that's the one at Hungerford and one at in Newbury Town Centre. The slide also details our partner registered providers and their input over the last 5 years with breakdown by tenure. So you look at the slide itself, you've got the SR, which is our social rent, got SO, which is the shared ownership, and AR, which is the affordable rent. And as you can see, our colleagues, our guests here today, SNG, have contributed over that period of 5 years, the vast majority of those houses in that breakdown. But you can see in 2023-24, we have got this imaginative one, the Farha and Grangers, who are both actually sort of not registered providers as such, but actually have provided those houses I mentioned. I'm happy to take questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues from Sovereign, would you like to do your presentation now, and then we'll take questions afterwards? Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rory Laidlaw. I'm the Director of Strategic Asset Management at SNG. What I wanted to do today was just give you a sort of crash course in our strategic asset management, everything that is involved in our decision making. I'm not going to read this out word for word, but what this basically says is we are looking to evolve our asset base so it is younger and greener. Why do we want to do that? So it is cheaper for our customers to live in, and it is cheaper for us to operate. How do we make such decisions? We have our asset grading model, which looks at 90 different data sets. 60 of those data sets are pulled from real-time information, and the other 40% is pulled from staff and customer workshops. All the data goes into a rather fancy equation, but it reduces it down, and it gives every single one of our homes an unbiased grade from very poor all the way through to good. Just to touch there, because I'm not reading this out word for word, but what we're trying to do is calculate the social value of each of our homes. We're trying to figure out what it is worth to us as social housing. And then what we do with it. These are just some examples of the data sets that get plugged into it. If anyone wants to go through this in more detail, I'm happy to pick this up outside and do a proper roadshow. But essentially, the scoring breaks down into the home score, the place score, and the sustainable future score. It doesn't take a rocket scientist that home is the actual structure, the place is the community, and the sustainable future is its sort of pathway to net zero. What we then do with this data is we geographically map it, and we are trying to identify pipeline. Essentially, but I'll get onto the pipelines in a second, actually. But we're trying to look for clusters of homes and how they score, so we can identify work streams in an efficient and sustainable manner. We've got 81,000 homes spread across the country, and it's really about being able to get into a community and make some changes and really improve that environment. So the three work streams are is parking the development pipeline for a second, but we look at retrofit, we look at regeneration, and we look at dispose and replace. We are looking to retrofit the homes that score good and average. We're trying to invest in them early to keep them in circulation for as long as possible. We are then looking to regenerate assets as they start to slip down our asset grading model and become slightly poorer. And then where we can't do either of these active interventions, we will look to dispose and replace. It's worth noting that the capital receipts that are raised from disposals go back into the retrofit, the regeneration pipeline, as well as the new development pipeline. So this is the dashboard of our asset grading model. This is for SNG as a whole. Actually, this is just for a Sovereign. 63,000 homes are in this. The average score of 39.61%, and you can see the breakdown. The bottom left shows you we have a objective to have all homes scoring good by the time we get to 2050, and this sort of gives you a breakdown of where those homes are: home, place, and sustainable future. This is the breakdown for where we are, so you can sort of see the scale of basically the different scoring tenures within it. So just to run through quite quickly some of the pipelines. So we've got retrofit, we've got the asset grading model, and what we've been trying to do is build a digital twin so we can start to chart the impact of different interventions on our homes well in advance of us actually going in and making the work. So it's like learning from the interventions we make. We've got smart homes where we've got meters in, and we've got a baseline understanding of how our homes perform just now. And then once the interventions go in, we can chart the impact those interventions have had, so we can then roll it out across the digital portfolio and figure out where it's going to be best in the physical portfolio. And it's sort of just trying to create that sort of feedback loop. Every home within the portfolio has a pathway to net zero. Passport, where we the aim and aspiration is to align the retrofit budget with our maintenance project to try and, strategically figure out when is the best point to go in and make an intervention to get our homes to net zero as quickly as possible. Trying to get homes to an EPC-B or an EPC-A to make sure that our customers are no longer in fuel poverty is critical. So here we're just touching upon, and again, I'll go, if anyone wants to speak to me outside of this, I'll happily go through all of the programmes and pipelines. But the homes we are trying to identify for the retrofit programmes are homes with an EPCC or below, homes with gas or electric boilers, and we're trying to find traditional build types with cavity wall construction, because they're essentially the low-hanging fruit within the portfolio. Homes that are obviously owned on a freehold basis, and we are looking for geographical clusters. There's a number, which I'm not going to commit, but it's in the hundreds that we are currently pipelining around here that will take place over the next 3 years under the SHDF Wave 3 funding. Next, we've got regeneration, so it's trying to identify places where social value is high, but the homes might not be performing as well as they could be, and it's how we go about it. We've got, not to steal my colleague's thunder, but we've got one that's just about to complete on Paradise Way, and one that's just about to kick off on Windmill Court. So we've got an active pipeline here. We're identifying other assets within the community to potentially prop that up when these ones complete. And then, unfortunately, it is for where we cannot find an active work stream. We will look to dispose and replace. It's not something that we take lightly. It goes through 3 or 4 scrutiny panels before the final decision is made. But then, unfortunately, at that point, it's about selling the homes. We look to sell on the open market to generate as big a capital receipt as we can, to then recycle back into the work streams. But we've previously had conversations with yourselves on where we've got blocks about trying to transfer them to other providers of social housing. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much for that indeed. Could I ask you, Mr. Laidlaw, if you could share those slides with our clerk, please, after the meeting, because it would be useful to be able to circulate them to members and indeed officers to have a more detailed look at, because there's quite a lot of information in there. And also we can add it, I think, retrospectively to the agenda pack, so that if any members of the public or anyone else wish to look at that information, they're able to do so. That would be great. Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Wollaston.
As I mentioned earlier, I represent Lambourne, which has a high need for housing. I'm very conscious of the fact that some of the stuff you own at the moment is probably in your disposal area. Can you give me any help at all in saying that money will be reinvested in Lambourne rather than being elsewhere in your portfolio?
$1 million question. Take it on board. We'll look at it. There's a big question around replacement, and it is very, very difficult because it relies on a development pipeline that's active and is one that's there for us. That's why we are funneling a lot of money into the retrofit and regeneration, because the homes already exist, and if they have the capacity to get them retrofitted in terms of, we can protect them for another 50 to 100 years. But I'll certainly look at it.
Can I just comment on that? So we do try where we can to replace within the local authority, that being the kind of general boundary, but it is difficult to be as specific as saying Lambourne. I know Lambourne to say that we're just going to replace there is really hard. It's not to say that we won't want to. It's not to say that we don't do rural development. We do, and we do the smaller developments, and you'll see that. So we are open to conversations about any opportunity. There are opportunities in Lambourne that you can help us with, then we would absolutely welcome that, because you are correct. Some of the property in Lambourne does fall into the dispose category.
Sorry, can I just take two more points? A, can I take you up on your offer of understanding your system rather better? And B, has gone completely out of my mind. Never mind. Thank you.
Okay, and just to build upon that, I'm aware in my ward in Ridgeway, we've lost some properties recently. So there was a bungalow that had an EPC rating of B and another bungalow that had an air source heat pump, which we were told by SNG would be disposed of. I've got there. Okay, sorry. Oh, right, councillor. Someone still got their... Laura, are you able to mute yourself? I think you're getting feedback.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I turned it off because I thought you were waiting to, because I had put my hand up, but that's okay.
Yes,
I can.
I'll come to you in a moment. Yeah, sorry, Laura. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very conscious that some of these properties are going, which ostensibly seem to be of a fairly high quality. Now, obviously, there'll be other renovation works that's needed, like, you know, insulation, bathrooms, etc. But I know from the rural areas, I would echo what Councillor Wollaston said. There is a real concern there, because to say that those houses will be replaced on the local authority footprint does not give much solace to people who live in the rural areas and who are seeing an attrition of local socially rented housing. And some of those areas, there are multi-generational families who want to be able to stay in the same area together. And, you know, COVID, for example, was a very good example of where it's really important for those extended families to be able to stick together. And they're concerned that, you know, young adults won't be able to afford to stay there. People won't be able to downsize because the small bungalows are going, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, just to echo what Councillor Wollaston said. Thank you very much. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. Are you taking questions to Councillor Gaines in it later?
Yes.
Just
both.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't want to repeat, but just following on from what you and Councillor Wollaston have said, because we've only just seen the presentation, it wasn't possible necessarily to understand to what extent concerns about the loss of particular types of accommodation in rural communities is factored into your decision-making process in terms of deciding you would dispose of. Because I would hope that some of the factors that the previous councillors have spoken about would weigh in terms of determining whether you're going to dispose or not. And it may have been that it does, and I just missed it because we've only just seen the presentation. But can I just ask if it, yeah.
Our preference is to always try and identify into the retrofit or the regeneration pipelines. When we are looking at the data and the data tells us a home is going to become obsolete under, you know, potential energy guidance, you know, legislation in general, we're looking like we're taking a long-term view. We will look to dispose and recycle that capital. So it's when we think it's going to become obsolete or it's not fit enough for our customers to live in, we'll look to dispose.
Can I just come back on that, Chair? I know that building costs have gone up, but my kind of layman's understanding of the way that these things work is that the land is obviously is often the most expensive thing. So is it never an option if the actual property is going to be obsolete to retain the land and build something on it rather than selling the land itself, because that's what's then difficult to obtain again for the...
I mean,
should I come in? I mean, we do have a targeted regeneration programme that we mentioned. So Paradise Way, we're building 10 new homes there, which are final ones due to be handed over next month. And Wimble Court in Mortimer, we've got 24 affordable homes due to go on site over the next couple of months, sorting out the last bit of ecology. So we are doing targeted regen, but often one-off properties in terms of redevelopment, it's just not financially viable for us to do. So that is where we go down the disposals route if they're not affordable for our customers to live in anymore.
Can I come in on that one? So, thanks, Laura. I think we need to come from the place that we want to provide as many homes as we can in the best locations we can for our customers as we can. So we're not in the position of just wanting to sell homes. We sell homes where we can't do anything more with them. We're in the business of providing quality homes for our customers, and that's you know, the ultimate aim of the piece of work that Rory described. We have to accept that there are times when some of the homes that we have just aren't feasible in terms of where we want them to be, getting to net zero, redevelopment or anything else, and often those homes are unpopular. But where we possibly can, we will work to retain the homes, to retrofit the homes, to provide good quality accommodation for our customers. And it's worth noting for things like retrofit. So, you know, a few years ago, retrofit was difficult sometimes to get beyond the front door for customers because actually it can be quite intrusive in terms of the work. So although we had quite ambitious programs around that, delivering them was quite tough. However, the recent changes we've seen around energy costs and energy provision has really changed that game, whereas our customers are saying to us, we're very, very keen for you to come in and retrofit properties where that's feasible. So that's, again, it's a real positive. But I think we need to start from the position that we're, our ambitions are the same as yours. We want to provide as much affordable housing as we can, and where we possibly can at social rent, because that's ultimately probably the most affordable option for our customers.
Thank you. Mr. Caprara.
Yeah, just to come in on what Rory and Luke are saying there, just looking at the example of Wimwell Court, which is a piece of work that both organisations have been doing recently, what we're seeing there is a net overall loss of affordable housing units, but actually this is a site that is largely obsolete, no longer fit for purpose that it was delivering. And what we're seeing achieved through the work between both organisations is 100% affordable housing through from 1-bedroom units right the way through to 4-bedroom social rented properties, which we wouldn't necessarily always guarantee on a sort of standard negotiated type scheme. So I think it's safe to say that it's not just about the numbers game, it's around what's the end product that we're looking to achieve for the longer term.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. You mentioned Paradise Way. That's in my ward, and actually the residents are really pleased now to see. I mean, there's 6 houses that were originally demolished were well past their life. They were put up rather quickly to house the refugees, I suppose you could call it, from the East End, who were camping in the old army accommodation that was on the common and moved into there. So it was well past its life, but it did its job. It was a little bit disappointing. I suspect it would be good to hear from you how long it took to go from actually an idea and the initial application to actually getting through there. And I do wonder if you'd like to see the local authority maybe a little bit more pushing to get some of these things through, because it's a lovely development that's now being completed.
Yeah, I'll take that. So we would definitely like the local authority to work with us more proactively on the planning side. It's been very challenging. Windmill Court is a good case in point. It's taken an extremely long time to get planning consent, get the Section 106 agreed and lift the covenant on the land. There's an over 55 covenant on the land and it's taken a long time and that costs us money. So we would definitely like the local authority to work with us. I mean, there's some specific examples on Wimwell Court and Paradise Way. We're leveraging central government grant funding, and to do that we need a variation to the 106 to enable that to happen, and actually getting the council's legal team to understand why we need that was very challenging. So yeah, more partnership working I would welcome every day of the week, because none of us want it to take that long.
Can I come in on that way? Because I think you're absolutely right. I know Paradise Way, and it did take an excruciating long period of time to get it through. The other piece of the jigsaw is often on smaller developments or regeneration. We have to move out residents that are already in situ. Wimwell Court being an example, and that can be challenging. So, in an ideal scenario, there is a bit of a pipeline, and you've got that circle, so you can often, the first development goes to some people moving out of another, and then the idea is that we can build up a sense of of activity and speed. But quite often it's getting going that's difficult. But we're here and we'd love, we want to work with you in order to create that, because looking at the numbers, we've kind of prided ourselves, I think, over recent years, because obviously we were the LSVT for this area, so we do like to see ourselves as the one that provides the most number of homes, and I saw us slipping down slightly on that chart. So there is a sense of pride there as well, that we should, and we would love to work more efficiently and quicker in order to get some of these schemes through.
And I think that's really fair. Like we're buying Section 106 units, and that's a lot quicker. If that's all I had to buy, then my life would be a lot easier. But the planning system is really challenging, and the decant as well, moving our customers out and moving them into suitable accommodation as well is challenging. So it does take a long time. I think we will get a bit slicker at it as well in terms of our processes. I think that's fair to say.
If I could just also...
Councillor Gaines wanted to come in. Sorry, Councillor Reid.
I'm really sorry, but I've got to take exception to the Wimble Court thing that you've just said. We actually had an awful lot of problems with your legal department, and I'm not here to go tit for tat, but basically it wasn't just our legal department. There were covenants on those properties, covenants that you wanted us to remove that we weren't prepared to move at the time because they would actually be detrimental to us as an authority. And so that was a lot of backwards and forwards. So I do take exception to that. I also think that there is a site in Kimpbury, which is actually your belonging to it's your land. It has been vacant for I don't know how long. When I first became a councillor 2.5 years ago, we went out to that site with one of your development agents to talk about putting houses on that site. 2.5 years later, we still haven't got any further than actually we need to talk about this. So it's not just one or the other, I'm afraid.
Councillor Reid, did you want to come back now?
Yes, just one of the other things. So, I mean, I think that's a regeneration that you did at Paradise Way, and it's worked really well. And actually, the residents are really grateful to see it, and it's become a real asset. But also have Brownfield, which you've got a significant number of properties in Upper Bucklebury. And I think you've also got some in Birds Lane down in Midgham as well, because my ward is actually fairly poor on social housing, so I know where they are fairly well. The retrofits have gone down really, really well. I think the heat pumps, and so the people who haven't had the heat pumps yet, they're all talking about it and they're waiting for them. So if we could have a little bit of acceleration on the heat pumps. I spoke to one person and he said it's made a genuine difference to his life or his family's life because the cost of living and having that money freed up where they can actually now do things which they couldn't before, like buying healthy food, was a really great outcome. So they're really grateful for those retrofits on the heat pumps.
Thank you. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to Mr. Laidlaw for the presentation, which was really interesting. I've got a question for Councillor Gaines, though. In the recommendations at 2.2 and also at section 4.23, there's references to opportunities to work with the local MP. Who is that?
There are two.
So why then does section 4.23 talk about opportunities to work with the local MP who's in the select committee with an opportunity to influence government policy? Mentions of Lee Dillon. Lee Dillon. I'm not finished my question yet, Councillor Gain. Does the council not suspect that not trying to engage with Olivia Bailey MP, who's my resident's local MP, who's Councillor Culver's resident's local MP, who's Councillor Sumner, and Councillor Reid's local MP, who is actually a member of the government?
Yes, but the MP Lee Dillon is actually on the Housing Select Committee, so he is able to influence housing, further housing policy. So he is the best person to speak to in that regard.
Other than a member of the actual government, who is many of us are local MP, not the local MP.
I appreciate that they're your local, that she is your local MP. However, she is not a member of the Housing Select Committee, and we are talking about affordable housing and housing policy for the future. He is the best person to get that information and to influence policy at the Select Committee.
I find that a remarkable statement that you're saying that a member of an opposition...
I'm sorry.
I'm not finished yet, Councillor Gaines, with your permission, Chairman, that you're saying that a member of an opposition party who's in the Select Committee has got less influence over government policy than an actual member of the government. I'm not talking about a Labour backbencher here. I'm talking about an MP. Now, I wish she wasn't our local MP. Councillor Culver probably does as well, given that we stood against her at the general election. But just to change tack a little bit, at a time when the council, with our support, I might add, has been conducting a charm offensive on the east of the district to try and persuade them not to throw their lot in. You know, I'm talking about parishes like Towhurst and Pangbourne and Thiel, etc., not to throw their lot in with Reading Borough Council and their attempt to extend their boundaries. And a lot of our residents are very politically engaged, and they'll read a report like this and they'll see West Berkshire Council talking about the local MP, and they'll think, God, yeah, they really do just think it's Newbury, don't they? Do you think it maybe was a bit poor to have the references to the local MP in the report?
That come across? No,
My God.
I don't. I
Thanks,
actually
Denise.
think because he's on the Select Housing Committee, I think he is best placed to influence policy on housing and affordable housing in the future.
Is he
End
the
of.
local MP for West Berkshire?
I think
I've
just
said
to
MP.
intervene here, members, I think it probably would be useful to also lobby Olivia Bailey, as Councillor Ross McKinnon rightly says, to say the MP. There are two, and I acknowledge what Councillor Gaines is saying. I don't think there's any harm though in us also lobbying Olivia Bailey MP.
I'm happy to do that,
Same
Chair.
issue.
I think, Chairman, perhaps an amendment to the recommendations might be appropriate.
Yeah, we can certainly make that recommendation. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you. Yeah, back to the subject at hand. Firstly, a general question. So the do the residents in sovereign households know where they sit in the asset grading model at any one time? Is that something they're made aware of?
No, because the asset grading model will change depending on our interventions that we take at different times over the course of the life. So it's live. It's in real time. So if we go in and retrofit something, that will improve the score. If we, undertake part of the asset management works like new kitchens, doors, windows, roofs over the course of the lifespan of the property, that will improve the score. So it's not something that we share. It's
okay. Maybe what I'm getting at is, somebody living somewhere where it falls within the retrofit category, let's say, would the residents know and expect, certain changes to be made within a certain time frame?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, we write to all the residents that have been shortlisted for the retrofit programme. We then go in and do surveys, and then they're in a clear pathway that we communicate with them regularly.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you. Yes. So the Nightingales is in the ward I represent. What are your plans for the Nightingales?
So we're going to talk about the regeneration plan. We'll talk about some interventions because there have been problems, as we know, at the Nightingale. So we're aware of those, and it's been an area that's frustrated us for many years. And I don't mean the Nightingales necessarily as a whole. I'm talking more specifically about the two buildings at the top, which are Springvale and Haworth. So in response to some challenges that we had there recently, we have for a while had 24-hour security up there. We've enhanced CCTV. We've made another number of interventions. We've got at the moment some I can't think of the word. Help me out. We've got three of them.
Oh, injunctions.
Injunctions.
Yes.
Sorry, we've got three injunctions going through. Sorry, I'm suffering from a cold, so I have a slight brain fog. We've got three injunctions going through at the moment to prevent certain individuals going back there. So there is a focused piece of work looking at the sort of current antisocial behaviour and some of the challenges we've got there. That said, that is only a respite. I think that the design of the area, and we acknowledge that, has makes it very, very difficult to do anything with the current building. So at the moment, it is on our radar. We are visiting it again in a couple of weeks' time. We were looking at what we can do with the area, in particular what we can do with those two buildings at the top. I share all the concerns raised here. It is certainly an area that we would like to change. I think changing just those two buildings in essence would make a huge impact in terms of the wider neighbourhood.
Okay, thank you. Just to say, I'm sure my ward colleagues and I would be keen to engage with that as well. Perhaps we can exchange details after this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I don't even know where to begin with the things that I've jotted down, if I'm honest. Let's start with the paper, first of all. Nick, I don't know how far the paper's going, but it needs a good thrashing with a spell checker. please, if it's going to go any further in a truly Bridgman fashion. It's yeah, if it does go any further, it will be worth doing so. Viability for developers is something that, as a member of a planning committee now for pretty much all of my council life, has been a topic which borders on tedium, because it is something which, first of all, we weren't allowed to share with public in conversation, and then became the almost expected position of a planning application's gone through, you just know they're going to come back. You just know they're going to come back. And the issue with that is, we as district councillors, especially sitting on committee, owe to our residents a solid decision based on the information before us at that point. And when that goalpost moves after we've made our decision, not only does it make us look like a right bunch of Charlies, it also undermines our position across the district to our residents, east or west. And that makes me nervous, because we should not be in that position. We make guarantees, and you've heard me in chambers before make the statement, which I took an absolute slating for across social media, about the backhanders that we take. Well, guess what? This just makes the situation even worse, and it pours fuel on the fire for those conversations. I do have issues with commuted sums, because in a situation where we, as a district, as the planning authority, struggle to find areas for developments to go, to think that they're not going to go in one area because it would be better to put the money to put it somewhere else, I think generates a risk, because there is no guarantee of that money going somewhere else. And there's an old-fashioned, and 58 now, I think I can go into old-fashioned without sweating too much, thought that says there is the potential to build negative neighbourhoods. There is the potential to, and I'm not going to, I'm trying to avoid words like slums, because we don't deal with those sort of areas as far as I'm concerned, but we do have areas of high deprivation. West Berkshire generally, no, fairly balanced. But I'm as east can be for West Berkshire. And I have one, Howard. I believe you have one in Lambourne. They are in the most bizarre places in many cases. Those places need investment, but I would steer clear of generating an area which would become an area of high deprivation, because it doesn't give you better control to deal with it and support the residents. It just makes issues. And I think we need to avoid that. I mean, for me, in my area, sorry, Denise, I'll let you in a sec. I've got other housing associations where I live. This is obviously, this presentation, this point this evening is very centric to one. Now, I understand that you're sizable. You mentioned in your comments several times about around here. What is around here? Because again, I live right on the Reading border. And Councillor McKinnon rightly mentioned earlier on the position about residents on the extremities of our district often feeling isolated, often feeling like, well, everything just goes to Newbury and Thatcham, doesn't it? It's very, very difficult to push back against that as an elected representative for those people. And it doesn't become easier as time goes by. We need to be mindful of the other organisations that are out there. We need to be mindful of your reach. I was interested that you mentioned Mortimer, because I wasn't aware that you had anything coming over into that area. So it's good to hear. It's, you know, it's not a negative comment, but that, and I have to be honest, in some of the ways that I've seen your people work, I will probably welcome you having some of the other properties that are closer to me and with other associations. But there are issues in what I have been able to glean from the presentation tonight. And rocket science aside, having the presentation before we sat down this evening, I can't see what's on there, and I'm not going to break my neck looking at what's behind me, I'm sorry. So you've gone through a lot of detail that you're familiar with tonight. I've not written most of it down. I've probably not taken on board 25% of it. There's a lot of, and yes, it will be very useful for it to come out later on, but it's after the event of the conversation that we're having now and any recommendations that we might find. I struggle with that because that's not how we operate this meeting. It's on us to make sure that we're familiar with the paperwork that we're talking about. And we've not been given the opportunity to do that. So we need to be mindful of that going forward. And I question the value of a presentation that we've not been able to go through. Not that there might be a holes in it or it's lacking information. Clearly it isn't. But with due respect, as I say, you've gone through something that you know at pace because you know it. We need to look at that. We need to understand what your position is, and we need to understand what we can do as representatives to make recommendations going forward. And I don't feel we've got the opportunity to do that fully this evening, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gaines, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, Councillor Sumner. I mean, I totally agree. I'm not in favour of commuting sums at all. However, it's got to be an option that we take forward because we can't always get affordable homes on sites. So the commuted sums are useful. For instance, Chestnut Walk in Hungerford is currently a derelict ex-dementia unit. We are using S106 money to actually turn that into some temporary accommodation. So that is a good use of S106 money. It will be used in the right way to make sure that we don't have so many families in hostels and hotels. So yes, I understand what you're saying about community sums. I'm not so sure I totally agree with you when it comes to sort of putting money into a area would actually cause it to be what did you call? I can't remember what you called it.
I avoided using the S.
Okay, well, I'm going to avoid it too. But basically, I think commuter sums are another, if you like, another gun in our arsenal to actually use to actually get more affordable homes. It's not the ideal solution, but it is a solution. And when it comes to Berkshire, rather than actually just Newbury and Thatcham, I myself am involved with all the other housing portfolio holders across the district, across Berkshire, talking about affordable homes. I know that our executive director is also in a group talking to other executive directors and that have got the responsibility for housing across Berkshire. So we are looking not just at Thatcham and Newbury, it is across the whole area.
Ms. Lawrence, did you want to come back on that as well?
I did. Thank you very much, Chair. I think Councillor Gaines at the beginning explained some of the challenges that we're facing around delivery of affordable homes. So talking about, the increase in costs, which is like Councillor Sumner's just mentioned, the all-time viability challenge that we're facing. Also, the requirement of the registered landlords for certain standards that maybe homes aren't delivering on. So because of the the timescales of schemes coming from the planning system through to actually delivery on the ground, what we're finding is some registered landlords are saying we don't want to touch them. They haven't met our new sustainability standards. So I think in these difficult circumstances to achieve affordable housing, it's really about flexibility and being able to have a range of tools in order to be able to get the best we can in terms of the key objectives. I think as a council we share in terms of delivery of good quality affordable housing that meets specific local need. So commuted sums is a tool, maybe not the perfect tool, the best tool, but a tool which will enable us through negotiation to get a better solution than in some instances the solution wouldn't exist otherwise. And that's the way we are advocating that we have some element of flexibility in the way that we actually apply some of the options that are out there to us to negotiate what is the best deal out of a difficult situation in a climate of increasing cost And we're not the only ones facing those increasing costs, because the registered landlords are also they're facing those increasing costs. And also they've got all this pressure on them to meet all of these standards in terms of condition, environmental sustainability and so on, which are upping their costs even more. One of the challenges that we are finding as well, and it'd be interesting, I don't want to put words in members' mouths, but one of the things for me is, we've heard about disposals. And in my experience, registered landlords find it much more difficult to manage individual smaller sites. And to what extent, I suppose, some of those disposals that you've mentioned today are influenced not only by the condition of the build, but also by the fact that they might be small sites in relatively isolated locations that are difficult for them to manage. So maybe it's something Sovereign would be able to reflect on and provide some advice of their position.
I think from Sovereign's side as well, the thing is, we don't, we've only got so much resource. I could, if I had double the size of my development team, then and double the money, I could do a lot more. I think it's the sad fact is there's so much demand, so we can only do so much. I mean, West Berkshire is really important to us, given our history here and the amount of stock we have. So, we are actively buying Section 106's sites in West Berkshire, which a lot of RPs just can't afford to do now. We can't afford to do in quite a lot of our areas. We have Section 106 of the Green and Thiel. We bought 29 social rented units and 13 shared ownerships there back in December last year. I think we exchanged on that one. Newbury Magistrates Court, we're obviously on site on that for people who've seen that in the town. And we've bought lots of Section 106 off Barrett's and Taylor Wimpey up at Donington. So we are investing in those areas, but I'm afraid it does come down to resource in quite a lot of cases. It's difficult to do it all. And I do have sympathy for West Berkshire in terms of those smaller sites when there's 1 or 2 units. Actually, for us buying, it's almost as much resource for us to buy 2 or 3 units than it is to buy kind of, in terms of staff time, to buy kind of 30 units on another site. So whilst we try, we can only do so much. And most HAs, I think, are in a similar position to us. So.
Can I just
just very quickly,
Yeah, very quickly, just to pick up the piece around quality, because I think that's really, really important. So we've seen lots of things around, the quality of some of the 106 schemes that have been on offer. And I think that certainly from an SNG perspective, we have got a home and place standard, which we adhere to. And we've done a lot of land-led schemes as well. So our preference is about 50-50 at the moment. We have been pushing our own land-led schemes because we have our own SNG house types, our own SNG design quality, which we think is really high, really aspirational. So where there are land opportunities, we will take those, and where it's viable, we will build those out with our own house types where we can, which we think are, are bigger, are larger,
Yeah, and Magistrates Court in Newbury is an example of that. So that's with Palladay Homes. But again, that's using Homes England central government money to do more, to have more control over the quality. So whilst we will engage with the PLCs on the Section 106 units, it is about quality and getting a balanced programme as well for our customers.
Okay, thank you.
Can
Did you want
come back
is
on
it
some of those
supplementary?
points? Yeah, sorry, thank you. I take your point about flexibility. I have no issue with flexibility. My issue is when the flexibility comes after the decision's been made by a planning committee. That's not flexibility. So we need to be clear in planning policy, in planning training, that the members are fully aware of the options that are out there. We want to build a toolkit. Absolutely superb idea. But the flexibility, and Councillor Gaines, I fully support the position that you took with regards to the work that's done pre-app. It's absolutely essential, and it's something when I was portfolio holder that the team was pushing hard to try and get more pre-app work done. Because if you can do the difficult stuff before you get to the point of application, you could let the legal beagles do what they need to do, then actually the application should be, to a degree, plain sailing. All you're trying to do is get the ratification of members if it's going to committee. My concern about commuted sums, and the better way of putting it, is creating areas of deprivation. That's my concern on it. So again, if we're going to have something in policy that says it's an option in the toolkit, fantastic. But let's have a design behind it that says what it's intended for. Because if we don't have that, if we haven't got it in black and white, then my concern is we will again be talking post decision. Let's bring it back in and see if we can get this changed and that tweaked and that dropped and make it cheaper for us to do that, because we don't think we're going to make the millions that we thought we were going to make before. And that's not housing association stuff, it's developers I'm talking about in the round, okay? And the only other thing with regards to the other associations, and yes, I accept that there are other conversations that are going on. I didn't really get the flavour for that in the paper. I think that's probably the issue there. So I've not taken that on board with the read through of the paper that we've got before us. So again, reflection on what we've got and what we are looking at before we come to the meeting. It would be useful to have addressed it at that point.
Thank you. Right, I've got three other members who've raised their hands, Councillor Wollaston, then Councillor Reid and then Councillor Coyle.
Remember my B. I've had issues recently with one of my residents who's had some problems. And I have to say your call centre is excellent. It's really efficient. They answer very quickly. They're a delight to talk to, but I can't get through them. So I can't get any further than talking to them. And they say, I will talk to someone, and no one ever comes back. So on the particular issue I was dealing with, Nick Caprara finally gave me, oh, sorry, not finally, thankfully gave me a contact. I emailed them and it was dealt with in 24 hours. But is there a way that perhaps councillors could have something where you can get behind the call centre?
So we do have a dedicated email address for MPs and councillors, so I can share that after the meeting, so then you can come directly. I know a few of you might have my direct email, which is fine, but there is a members' inquiries email address as well.
Thank you.
That's useful to know. Good. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to add that the paper was really useful to me. I think it really brought out the options that are there. Many of them I hadn't really thought about before. I must admit, I've got my own personal concerns about commuted sums, and one of that is finding the land. You know, it's I believe land was stopped being made after the Ice Age, so it's becoming a bit of a rare commodity out there. But giving that example where we have used it, that really brought it to life. I think your paper actually, as I suppose a term you could say is the premier partner we've got in the area, that really added some colour to the report for me. Thank you for that as well. I was just wondering if we can think a little bit more, maybe in the options. It's things like the Connecting Communities Berkshire opportunities. Now, I know there is a bit of a limitation with that, and I have asked the question, I'm waiting for an answer back, but maybe Claire Lawrence can know this from the top of my head. My understanding is it has to be close to a settlement boundary, but we are quite poor in, West Berkshire to me is small little communities that grow organically, but many of them don't have settlement boundaries, and it means that we couldn't use, even though residents almost certainly would like to see, 5 to 10 social housing round, especially the developments that have been made at Paradise Way. But, if they wanted to grow in Chapel Row any further, they can't, because there isn't a settlement boundary for Chapel Row, even though it's still quite a large settlement itself. So that's one thing I'd like to hear about. And maybe also something that we're missing as well, almshouses, the oldest form of social housing we've got, maybe that's also an opportunity. We do have the chair of the National Almshouse Association, lives in my ward. There is a significant amount of almshouses in Chapel Row as well. Example, there's a great, fantastic little community there, very much loved, very much right to the bus stop. It'd be nice to have a regular bus there rather than having to do the call up, but we still have the ability to do the connecting bus, so it can be on demand. But there is also a community of people who you can just phone up and you can organise a community car from there. So I do wonder whether we can do a bit more for connecting communities Berkshire, something around settlement boundaries, and also maybe a little bit more around almshouses.
Councillor Gaines.
We're actually working quite closely with Maria. Maria is actually connecting communities Berkshire, and that's why she's come on this evening. So her and I have had several meetings about different rural exception sites across the district. So it is being looked at. Almshouses are not in the paper. I will take that away, Chris. Oh, sorry, Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coyle.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I had a scattering of questions. I'm sorry. Just first to SGN, I was just wondering in the paper that Nick and Denise have presented, there's a reference to the fact that providers often seek a waiver from the designated protected area status in order for schemes. It says specifically for schemes in rural areas to allow shared ownership units to be staircased up to 100%. I just, given that we've been talking particularly a lot about the difficulties in getting affordable housing of various kinds in rural areas, wondered is there a particular rationale for this? Why this is needed in those areas?
I can just say from SNG's point of view, we can't get mortgage lenders who'll lend on shared ownership in DPA areas. So there just aren't enough mortgage, or if we can, there's like one or two providers. So the interest rates for shared ownership purchase is just prohibitive. Therefore, we just can't sell sensibly shared ownership homes in DPA areas. Hence, we always need to ask for that to be lifted.
Okay, thank you. And just a general concern I wanted to raise around this question of more flexible 106 clauses. I mean, I desperately want more affordable housing for our residents and in the country generally, and I do see the need for flexibility. But what concerns me is that the paper seems to be suggesting that actually, or recognising that this could at least initially lead to a fall in the number of affordable housing units, and I'm trying to understand. I understand that it's a struggle to get more to get these things across the line, and for all the reasons that have been outlined, but the figures don't look. Forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but the figures don't necessarily look that bad in terms of what we're collectively achieving as it is. And I'm just a bit worried about the pendulum slipping too far the other way, and this essentially ending up being an excuse for developers to try and avoid the Section 106 requirements, or as others have reflected, it all ending up going too much towards commuted sums where there are problems. So when we talk about cascade mechanisms allowing for alternatives, I just would be concerned about what that allows room for, and that these need to be robust enough that that developers can't just wriggle out of things unless it's really, really necessary. And sorry, I'm just going to throw these things out there if that's all right, Chair, and then perhaps whoever wants to respond can respond. On a slightly different note, in relation to, we've been talking about this in the context of commuted sums, about building elsewhere, potentially in land-led schemes. I just, in terms of the issue that it's largely been, it seems agreed that it's not a way to go for us to be, that for the council itself to be setting up a company of its own. And I understand the reasons for that. But our figures look, we've still got some wriggle room, some headroom, it looks like, in terms of the number of properties that we could own ourselves, I think, from my understanding, Denise. And I'd be really keen for us to push up to the top of that headroom, because I do think having our own housing stock, particularly for families in temporary accommodation and some other there's other groups that tend to be, in my experience, quite hard to place in longer term housing is really important. And I hope that we're going to see that as to aspire to be quite close to that ceiling, rather than sort of putting any kind of brake on acquiring our own housing. And I know that there's quite a lot that have come on stream recently, which is really good. And sorry, I think I've nearly finished. I just I guess this is sort of built into what we're saying, that we're going to ask the MP, and I completely agree with the comments. I think we should be asking both our MPs to lobby as hard as they can in whatever way they can. Is that there's a general theme developing about the particular difficulties around the right kind of provision in rural areas for all of the challenges that Sovereign have put out, and also because the current system just doesn't, it pushes towards bigger developments because of the way that the grant, as I understand it, the Homes for England grants are structured. And I just think, as you know, I'm somebody from a rural ward, and I think lots of us on the committee tonight are, that it's just really important that we as a largely rural authority are pushing very hard to make it easier for there to be small developments of social housing where people need them. And that seems to be a particular kind of block that I think we do want to lobby our MPs to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coyle. Who would like to come back? Yeah, Ms Lawrence.
Thank you. So I'm going to use an example because I think this might actually help members to understand an approach. So we have had a site that's come forward from a developer, which has been granted permission a number of years ago. It's come forward, doesn't meet the sustainability requirements, and none of the registered landlords will take it on. So we are stuck with a site. And what happens in those instances, and we've heard Councillor Sumner air his frustration, and I think we're all frustrated about the fact that the developers then come back and say, no one will take it on. And therefore, I'm going to put in a planning application to vary this legal agreement so that because no one will take it on. And if we haven't got the ability to be a little bit flexible, i.e. looking at a different type of accommodation, so for example, there are other companies that would take first homes and provide that. You can staircase out of them, not ideal, but at least it's a form of affordable housing. Or we could say, well, actually, you can put them on the open market and give us an affordable, a Section 106 for it instead, give us a commuted sum, rather than lose through an appeal process the ability to get anything on that site because the developer is going to challenge us. And that's the kind of situation that we're finding, which is why we're suggesting having these different tools and different flexibilities so that rather than have nothing, we can get something. And so I absolutely understand some of the concerns around the different models and what's ideal and versus a commuted sum. But those are the scenarios that we're facing quite regularly now. And this is something, having a bit more of a pragmatic approach means we get something rather than nothing. And if we take a commuted sum, for example, I'll give that as an example, what we could do is Sovereign selling off a site. Maybe we can take that site and regenerate it using those commuted sums. So we actually still enable, rather than a loss of affordable housing, we enable the continued provision of affordable housing. So it's just about having to think about things in a slightly different way because of the circumstances we are, the pressures in terms of, the financial pressures facing the registered landlords, the significant cost of land, the significant cost of materials, the significant cost of labour. So that's why I understand the concerns around Councillor Coyle. You mentioned the flexibility and some of the uncomfortableness that might create, but this just gives us, we will always try and go for the absolute maximum we can get in terms of our policy and so on. But there are sometimes circumstances that are outside of our control, which enable us, having a bit of flexibility enables us to get the best we can. So that's just an example, and I hope that that was helpful. In terms of just talking about the rural areas, and this is something that's been picked up on through the Policy Development Group on Viable Villages. And that group has agreed to focus part of the work on two things. One is around community development in rural areas, and the other one is looking specifically at affordable housing. In rural areas and things like rural exception sites and so on. So there's a real opportunity through that, I think, to dig deep into this issue and come up with some real recommendations around policy positions for how we deal with affordable housing in rural areas. And I would be pleased to invite you along to that, because I think our members would really appreciate your inputs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gaines.
So just for that point, in actual fact, Connecting Communities Berkshire have actually done some needs analysis on a number of rural villages around our area, around Berkshire. And so if you are interested in your village is actually interested in looking at some rural exception sites, then you need to get in touch with Maria Kelly on that basis. Coming back to the questions of number of properties, yes, you're absolutely right. I'd love to have some more houses. We can't go above, I think it's 199 without having to have a housing company. Yeah, but we have bought 27 in the last 2 years, using both our own money and also some government funding. But I'm very keen to increase the number of houses we have in our portfolio, in all honesty, because if we do that, then we've got the flexibility to put people in there that we in the order that we want necessarily. So yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting what Councillor Gaines has just said about the housing revenue account territory and having more than 199, because my understanding is we've got around 100, and I know that Vale and South have got around 100 as well. So were that merger to go ahead, that would automatically take us into that territory. Are we mindful of that?
There's also a housing association already in the South Oxfordshire council. So yeah, that would.
Is that SOHA?
That's SOHA.
Yeah. Okay.
Mutuals, but the council's got an interest in that, so it's a real opportunity, I think, and we've already started working with them, and there's a couple of sites in our district that we're working with them on as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Can I just ask for some clarity about the affordable and social housing units that we need by the end of the local plan period, 2041? Because there's various figures in here, and 2027 was mentioned, 2030 was mentioned. The local plan takes us up to 2041. So just for absolute clarity, how many affordable units and how many social units are we targeting in that period?
I can't do the maths that quickly, Chairman, I'm afraid.
Okay. All right,
but just to say, there is an error in there. It should be 2030. That's on the manifesto. That's manifesto commitment.
Okay.
Is 1,000 affordable homes by 2030. We are currently committed to 515 per annum on the current local plan. But obviously, with the new government targets, it's 1,071 in the future per annum. Yeah, so it's going up by 116%.
Okay, but yeah, if we could get some clarity on those figures, I think that would be useful for us for looking back at. So I understand that I think the case that Ms Lawrence referred to might be one where they got planning permission and then the Future Home Standards came in, which said that they had to be carbon neutral by 2030, is it? No, 2025. So they kind of fell foul of the fact that the law changed, I think. So one would hope that wouldn't happen again. Yeah, okay.
Chair, the problem is that the time lag between permission and getting built out, regulations do change very regularly, as you all know. But we, you know, as I say, it's just having a few tools in our pocket in certain circumstances.
Yeah, sure.
My colleague, Councillor Marsh, who couldn't be with us tonight, has asked me to ask a question about Newbury House on the Andover Road. I remember when I was on Western Area Planning a long time ago now, we had a site visit there, and they did, I think SNG had planning permission for it, but I understand it's now been sold to two separate private entities. That's an example of attrition of social housing as well, which this authority had given planning permission for. Could SNG shed some light on why that came to pass?
Why the disposal took place?
Yeah, because you had planning permission to build some social housing units. I think it was to regenerate the building. I think there were 10 flats and it was in desperate need of renovation. And you had the planning permission to do that, but then sold the property.
I'll certainly look into it.
Okay, yeah, it'd be useful to get some information. My understanding is the block of flats has been sold to one entity and then the planning permission to build two houses in the garden has been sold to another entity.
So we sold, we sold it.
Okay.
That deal that you're talking about subsequently took place following our sale. We didn't undertake two sales.
You didn't, oh, okay, you didn't undertake two, okay. Are you able to shed any light on why you sold those? Why did you decide that actually you didn't want to do that project yourselves? Do you have that information?
Not to hand, but
No.
like if
you come back, yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. It mentions in the paper about the, I think it mentions in the paper, the Social and Affordable Homes Programme, which the government are going to be opening in February. Is that something that the council and or SNG and others are going to work together to bid for some funds?
So certainly central government have just announced that the new funding programme. So SNG are strategic partners with Homes England, so we'll be putting a bid forward for SP3 Wave, and that's the funding that we use to fund these 100% affordable developments that we're doing through our regeneration side.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. I think it might be useful, members, if we had more information about the forward plan of the sites that we have already identified where we can have social housing for this local plan period. So it's very clear, you know, this is an area where we anticipate X number of affordable and social units, and there's this site where we anticipate similar, and then a bit of insight into where we think sites could be identified. So if we did commute sums and we wanted to go and build our own housing, for example, where do we anticipate those sites actually might be? Because we don't want to just talk about this in the abstract. You know, do we know that if we commute some sums, we have got our eyes on some areas where we could actually build that out? Yeah.
So in terms of allocations of development in the local plan, we have a local plan policy that requires a certain deliverability of number of percentage of affordable, social, etc. homes on those particular sites. So on things on those sites, like, you know, the sites allocated in North East Satcham, for example, we've got policy which is, I think from memory it's 40% because it's a greenfield site. And other areas, you know, we have similar policies. So we can estimate, and I'm sure that through the local plan process, it was probably something the inspector looked into as well. It's quite difficult on any sites that might come up, which we could use any funding to bring back into use, because those would be sites that tend to be smaller sites, the small scale, because if it's something that we've already heard the limit of the 199, so anything over 200, so we've got to deal with small sites. We can't be looking at big sites unless we flip into a HRA account. For those sites, it's quite difficult because what we find is we tend to be a bit reactive. So something will come on the market, or Sovereign will contact us and say, we're looking to dispose of this, and we'll certainly assess it and work out whether or not it's a viable option for us. So it's not something which we've got a pipeline for. So it's quite difficult to define. I mean, at the moment, I think we can give you an example of some of the projects that we're looking at, but it'd be quite difficult to give a longer term pipeline, I think.
Thank you. I think it would be good to have some more information because, like I say, we don't want to end up with commuted monies in a pot somewhere, and then we don't know where we're going to use that money. And then the paper also mentions local plan affordable housing policy, SP19, presumably the 16, beg pardon.
It's sorry, Chair, it's 16 because this was written before the local plan was and so all the numbers changed.
Yeah. So presumably, as we discuss the ideas in this paper, will that policy have to change? It will have to be updated to reflect whatever of these options you decide to go forward with?
Not really, because it's just a strategic sort of idea. So it's not got the detail that this paper has.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. And then I'm conscious you didn't have very much notice of this, Councillor Gaines, about Chestnut Walk. We had a request from a member of the public for some more information about why that joint venture didn't go ahead. Someone mentioned earlier it was a dementia unit and there was going to be a joint venture between the council and Sovereign to turn that into some social housing units. Did you want to make a comment this evening on why that didn't proceed and what lessons we learnt from that and what the cost was and the sort of lost value of having not delivered on that project?
I don't have all those details. I'm happy to answer questions. I mean, basically, the joint venture started, I think, in 2020. The contract was signed. 2 planning permissions were created in 21 and 22, I believe. One for the land above Phoenix Court, and one at Chestnut Walk. Both pieces of land belong to West Berkshire Council. We entered into a joint venture with SNG, well, Sovereign at the time, to build on those 2 sites. The planning permissions were both approved. It transpires that the one at Phoenix Court was not viable almost immediately. It was for, I think, two-story apartments, and so the viability wasn't there. And then when they looked at the detailed planning, the detailed construction of the one at Chestnut Walk, it was again due to things like construction costs, labour costs, etc. But the most telling thing at that particular site was the drainage issue. There was a drainage issue where the eight houses, the 8 townhouses that were going to be put there, would need significant drainage redevelopment, which actually would make the site unviable, which is why the joint venture was actually finished. I think it was probably last year. I'm trying to think when I think it was about autumn last year. There is a sum of money, but I can't bring it to hand at the moment. I can certainly get the information to you though.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as I say, I'm conscious that you didn't have very much time to respond to that. But I think if we could make a recommendation that you come back to us about any of the questions in that request with more information, that would be really helpful.
Will do, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'm just having a look. Oh, SNG, I'd be interested to know a bit about your tenant engagement. I'm conscious this is something that registered providers have to do. Could you give us a little bit of insight into how you engage with your tenants? Because councillors, a lot of members of the public have approached us with concerns about the sell-offs and with concerns about maintenance. Can you shed some light on how you engage with those residents and how you ensure that they have information and that you are accountable to them?
So in relation to any kind of disposals, then we have a rehousing support team that will support those customers who are affected. Our target operating model is we have localities, so we've got locality officers that are assigned to sub-localities, so our customers within those localities have single points of contact. Our property services team also work within that locality model as well. So, you know, customers can get through and speak to local people and then be able to see them face to face as well. So as well as kind of the housing element, we have loads of support within SNG for customers that's far reaching for kind of, fuel poverty, benefit advice and things like that. So there's a lot of engagement done within the locality teams, but also wider in SNG as well.
Great, thank you very much indeed for that. Are there any more questions from members? I think we've got a few recommendations that we need to capture. So one I've got here, Councillor McKinnon has very helpfully sent me his suggested words for a recommendation. He mentioned about the local MP. He suggests that we change the line that says continuing to engage with the local MP to lobby government and providers to tackle significant barriers to delivery at the current time, and change it to continue to engage with Lee Dillon MP and commence engagement with Olivia Bailey MP to lobby government and providers to tackle ... So that would be the replacement text. Are members content with that? Yeah, okay. So if you make a note of that, Mr. Chard, that's great. Thank you very much. Also, if we could have the slides, that would be great. And we'll make sure that we share them with members. We add them retrospectively to the agenda pack. And I suggest members, if you have any subsequent questions once you've had a chance to digest the slides, I recognise it's not ideal that we haven't had a chance to do that this evening. But if you have further questions, I would suggest that we gather those together, perhaps via Mr. Chard, and send them on to SNG if there's any further questions.
Just to say, yeah, happy to circulate that. I mean, we've got heaps of information. There's tons of data that Rory can share. So have a look at the pack, and then if it works for you, then we can have a more bespoke session where we can sit down and go through it and explore the housing from our perspective as we see it across West Berks.
Great, thank you. And then if we could have clear figures for 2041 as well, that would be great. Sorry, Denise.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Can that pack be displayed to all members? Because I think every member in the council would be interested in the affordable homes.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. Thank you for that suggestion. Thank you. Yes, and then clarity on figures for 2041, just so we're absolutely certain about what our target is over the local plan period, would be very helpful. Chestnut Walk request for further information. We can liaise about that and make sure that the member of the public gets that. Regarding the options that are in the paper, do members want to make any specific recommendations about those options? Do we want to, for example, say that we think one is particularly favourable, or that any of them are not a good idea? Do members have any comments on that?
I think it's a toolkit, isn't it? That's what's being proposed as a toolkit, and you take down the one that's appropriate. So for us to predict what each planning application or opportunity could be would be having a crystal ball. I don't think.
Okay, fair comment. Any other members got any concerns about that? Is there anything they don't think should be in the toolkit maybe? No, everyone's happy with that? Okay, good. So that's a consensus on that then. Good, okay. And then it was mentioned to invite Connecting Communities Berkshire along to the policy development group. I think that would be a good idea. And perhaps we could do more to promote the work of that organisation as well. I'm conscious that they've done some work recently with Compton Parish Council in my ward, and I wasn't totally au fait with what it was that organisation offered. So I think maybe we could make an effort to promote that to all members so that they're aware that they are there. And then if they have a need in their area for a housing survey or some advice, that would be invaluable. Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. And then Councillor Sumner, you mentioned about training for members of planning committees and just making sure that they are aware of these discussions and this toolkit. Should we put something in as a recommendation around that?
Yeah, I think so, Chair. I think if we're going to start changing the way that members need to consider the applications before them and the toolkit that is going to be available, then I think that's essential.
Okay. Any other views? Happy with that? Yep. Okay, great. Good. Have I missed anything?
Armed houses, I think that's a good opportunity, whether that's something that we could use commuted funds, but obviously there needs to be significant donations from other charities or private individuals to fit within that. But I know it might be worth interviewing the chair of the Armed House Association to get his view. He has been trying to lobby us. So maybe if Councillor Gaines could go out and visit him, or Mr. Kapara.
Yeah, if I just come in on that one, I've been dealing with the chair of Lambourne Junction because they've just developed new almshouses and have got a proposal for developing further in terms of how we engage to take residents from our housing register. So that engagement is already ongoing, albeit it's fairly small scale, but it is that rural re-provision. So.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Wollaston.
The SAG very kindly offered to provide the contact details for the members go straight to.
Yeah.
That was much appreciated, really is.
Great. Thank you for that reminder, Councillor Wollaston. Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Good. Okay. Excellent. Well, I think that was a really, really useful item. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for your participation in that. Thank you to our guests for coming along. You are now free to leave. And thank you very much to Councillor Gaines and to officers who've been here as well for that item. Good. Would anyone like a comfort break for 5 minutes before we go to the next few items, or do you just want to try and rattle through?
Just bash on.
Bash on. Okay. I am conscious that some of my colleagues have had a number of comfort breaks. Not. Good. Right. Moving on. Item 8, appointment of task and finish groups. This is a standing item and we don't have any terms of reference to approve or any new task and finish groups to approve of or memberships thereof. So I don't think we need to say anything further on that matter at the moment. Item 9, task and finish group updates. Councillor Reid, would you like to give us an update on the project management group?
Let me just open my notes on that. Yes, so this is an update on the task and finish group that we had on the 25th of November. For the 25th of November. So we last met on the 20th of October to look at Care Director 6. That was the first part, so we're going to look at it in 2 parts. The following officers attended to give evidence. We had Kate Toon, who's the Programme Manager, Integration, Digital and Quality. We had Phil Cridge, who's the Systems Integration Officer, and Melanie O'Rourke, who's the Service Director for Adult Social Care. The session was really productive, really productive and well prepared for by the officers, so it was most appreciated by the task and finish group. We explored a variety of aspects, including the project timeline, major milestones and gateways, project management involvement prior to setting up the project, key risks related to the project, and whether the project tolerances were agreed at the outset and subsequently tracked and reported. The point at which it became clear that the project was no longer on track, the client and supplier relationship over the course of the project, and how it was supported, support was provided to the project manager by the project board and the board's decision making. So there's lots of rich conversation, lots of questions and answers that were well prepared for. The task group has identified a number of provisional findings and recommendations on the back of these sessions. These will be tested and explored further in the next session with the senior managers, predominantly of the programme board and of the executive. We did extend an invitation to the supplier to give evidence to the next session, but unfortunately they have declined, which is a bit unfortunate because they are still a current supplier to us. We have also undertaken an online survey of staff who are involved in the testing of the Care Director 6 software to seek their views and feedback. The closing date of the survey is actually today, and we'll be analysing the results ahead of the next meeting. We're also already looking ahead to the iTrent Phase 1 project, and I have written a pre-meeting with I have a pre-meeting with officers tomorrow. We will look to arrange an evidence session in early to mid-January, and we're hopeful we'll be able to cover this off in a single session.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Reid. Thank you to you and your colleagues for all your work on this. Do you have an anticipated end date for this, when you think it might come to this committee for consideration?
I think we're really looking end of March, beginning of April time.
Okay, thank you. Do colleagues have any questions for Councillor Reid about this? No, okay. Thank you very much for that. Item 10, Executive Forward Plan. Do members have any items from this that they think we should add to our work plan or get any more information about? No. Okay. Item 11, Corporate Programme. So we now have the corporate programme on our agenda pack, which is something we agreed we'd like to have before, which I think is very useful. Do members have anything from here that they think that we ought to be looking at scrutiny? Okay. I think it might be.
Apologies.
Sorry, Councillor Reid. Yeah.
That's all right. I knew there was something in there and I had highlighted it. I do wonder, I think we might have missed the boat, actually, the rights of way improvement plan. But that was 6th of November, unfortunately. So I don't know if that was, it is, I must admit, I don't know if that actually came up in the executive as a question or whether it just got passed through. When you attended the executive.
Yeah, Ms. Lawrence, want to comment?
Yes, it's that was been has been approved now. So that's been an adopted document.
Okay, I can't expect it. I mean, it's been around for a while, so I can't believe anything controversial would have been in there. So, just personal interest.
Well received by both the executive and the opposition as well.
And I believe it went through an extensive amount of consultation as well.
A great deal of consultation, yes. If you'd like to see the papers, it is in the last executive and it's also got a link to all the consultation responses if you're interested in looking at that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A topic which I recall coming up numerous times as a portfolio holder, certainly in conversation, was this Hennick-Worthy, and I know it says a Hennick-Worthy master plan. I wonder whether that might be one that is worth having conversation here about.
Ms. Lawrence, did you want to say anything about that? Because that's under your hat,
yes,
isn't it?
It is. Yeah, so at the moment we're out to consultation on the playing pitch strategy. One of the things that we will be looking at through that is around a kind of delivery plan for the playing pitch strategy. And obviously Hennick-Worthy is part of that as one of our major sites in the district. We are looking at that at the moment and trying to get all of the different sport bodies to agree what can be achievable on that site. But we are still in the process of trying to resolve that at present.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that update. That is useful. Just looking at the timeline, Hennick-Worthy comes up in mid-February, whereas playing pitch strategy comes up mid-March. So we just need to be clear on what we might have to talk about at what point.
Yeah.
And potentially there's a piece of work which joins both together, but that's there's a month between the two of them. So.
Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So I've just actually asked, given the fact that we are in a position of trying to speak to the different national bodies of sport, and all the different clubs have all got their own interests, of course. We don't think we're going to be in a position to meet that deadline for February for Hennick-Worthy. So we were going to try and amend the forward plan to just put to be confirmed, because until we've actually got something of a solution and options that would work, then it's quite difficult to actually come up with, something for scrutiny to scrutinise, really. But certainly take on board, and we will update you as to the timescales as that progresses.
Thank you.
The playing pitch strategy is on the work programme already, but an unscheduled date. So we probably, when we get to that item, let's have a bit more conversation about that. Yeah, okay, thank you. And I noted on here the future care home strategy hasn't got a date against it. I'm conscious that there isn't a senior officer here for this area, but could we get some clarification, please, Mr. Charge, on what the timescale is for that? Because I know that's been an objective of the council for a little while now. So I think it would be good for us to get some clarity about what the timescale is for that. That's on the corporate programme, yes. Yeah, I think it's the second or third line on there. And also, I think it'd be useful, we mentioned under the action plan that there is an unmet action to provide us with the Graiseley business case. Graiseley's mentioned on here as well. That's the solar farm project for anyone watching who doesn't know what we're talking about. So I think if we could get that business case and also think about whether or not we might like to look at that as well. Ms Lawrence?
Yeah, we are in the process of still finalising that business case.
Okay.
You'll appreciate it is quite complex. So we hope to be in a position fairly soon to have that, but it's not yet prepared. It's not finalised.
Thank you very much. So do you think there's a time when it might be good for us to look at it at scrutiny? When might be a timely opportunity to do that, should we decide that we would like to do that? Bearing in mind the financial difficulties that the council finds itself in, and it's quite a big project.
Can I come back to you on timescales with that?
Sure. Thank you very much. Okay. Good. Any other comments on the corporate programme? Nope. Okay. Moving on to our work programme. Let's find it on here. Two separate packs here. So we have lots of finance items to discuss at our meeting in February. At the bottom of that list, it talks about the transformation programme, and we did ask for an update when we had our meeting in September. We said we'd like an update after a few months just to get a bit more information. I'm conscious that that budget meeting is going to be packed with quite a lot of information, and it might not be a good time to do it. I think it might be timely for us to try and look at it before that budget meeting if possible, because as we know from that discussion we had in September, it's a really big piece of work and it is designed to save the council money. So I'm wondering whether having sight of that update ahead of the budget meeting might actually be quite helpful, because it might help to inform our discussion. Yeah, I'm getting nods of agreement. Good.
I think so. I think one of the recommendations was to make, instead of it being a huge, great pack, which seems to be more of a sales pack than it was an information pack, if we can have it more like a dashboard. Let's get that, something that would have been presented at a program. It is a program after all, something you would present as in progress to a program board rather than a sales pack. Where, you know, I think we've done the salesy bit.
Yeah.
I think we just want to need to understand what the progress is now, and obviously having the transformation program manager there would be absolutely vital. I think it'd be pointless without having the program manager there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ms Lawrence.
Waving. So we've just been looking at a report that's going to come forward for executive, and what that's looking at is our financial sustainability going forward. And one of the things we'll be looking at is not only the governance around that, but how the transformation programme then supports that financial sustainability. So I think until we've kind of gone through that process, it's going to be quite difficult to then put together the formal transformation programme going forward, because it is going to be looking at our kind of high impact, high cost, you know, where we're going to be focusing our energies as an organisation from a financial perspective. So I suppose what I'm saying is I'm not clear it's going to be available in its future form before you look at the budget papers, because I think if we're going to be looking at the governance around our financial sustainability, one of the things that we're looking at is bringing in a future financial improvement group, which is going to have external people on there, and that's going to then inform what we're going to focus on going forward, and really our transformation programme is going to sit and wrap around that to make sure we've got deliverability of that programme. So it's kind of a bit like a chicken and egg. It's going to develop as our financial improvement plan develops as well. So I'm just saying that because I think what we might find is the timing of looking at that programme might not align with what you've just suggested. But I'm not the expert on this, and we were discussing it today at corporate board. So it will need input from Sarah, I think, and Gabrielle. But that's kind of where we're going at the moment. So it's just a caveat, really, that the timescales may not align.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. It was February when we first asked for an item about transformation, and then it was due to come to us in July, and it was delayed until September. And we had asked the portfolio holder to give us some information about the costs and benefits of the programme. So, for example, the asset sales and the opportunity costs of losing those assets and not having the rent, et cetera, et cetera. So we, in September, were not able to clearly say whether or not that programme is saving us money, because we didn't feel we had the complete figures about where the money was coming from and what it was being spent on. So whilst I accept your point, Ms Lawrence, I don't think we should be delaying looking at this again, you know, on a constant basis, because the care homes has been an objective for a while now, and we don't know what's happening with that. The resource centres was an objective, and that didn't happen. So I think if colleagues are minded to not delay and to seek as much information as we can get before that
look,
budget
really.
meeting.
So rather than the forwards look, we can do the backwards look and then reassess.
And that's what we need to do, because the Section 151 officer did make it very clear to us that the key objective of transformation is to save money. So we as Scrutiny need to look at the figures and say, have we actually saved money? And I don't think we can make that judgment at the moment, Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chair. I accept what Lawrence has been saying with regards to chicken and egg. I was going to use the exact same phrase myself, but it's in danger of becoming a rotten egg if we don't start looking at it soon. This needs to be a 360. I totally agree with the point that Councillor Reid made. We are bought into this. We don't need to be pitched anymore. We just need to look at what's been going on, how successful it has been or not, and what the future direction of travel is, to use lots of well-worn phrases in one. But no, I'm totally with you on this. To delay it just means that either we get to the point where we can't put it in because the budget papers are going to completely dominate and we're not going to be sitting here till midnight, please God, or it's after. And then it seems like we've wasted an opportunity to get some solid understanding before the budget papers come before us. So I totally support what you're saying there. It needs to come forward.
Okay, so we would need to do that in January, effectively, ahead of that budget meeting in February. So we would have to have another meeting. I'm also very conscious that in the financial statements, there were 4 key areas of governance identified in here, some of which pertain to transformation. And it mentions in here the business support review and what was the other aspect? Project management, and about how these were really important areas to look at, considering our financial situation. So rather than just have the one transformation item, I wonder whether we could look at these aligned issues around business support review, centralisation of officers around particular tasks, that kind of thing, and just look at it holistically. Because it's very clearly set out in the financial accounts as being key areas that the council need to look at. And it's also got a date of February against it. So hopefully in January, officers would be in a position to give us an update about those areas as well. Councillor Reid.
Wondering whether we should also get an update on how Mosaic's going for the rollout, and when would that be appropriate? Because that's going to be key for the IT systems for our for the business that is council.
Do you want to expand upon that a bit about why you think we should do that, what your concerns are, etc.?
Well, I think we've had a report on the LRIE that said that there was concerns around project management, how that was being delivered. We had the same around the sports hub as well. I think we're looking at the project management now. So some recommendations. It looks like, you know, it's positive that that on the project management side, things have improved, certainly on the large scale ones. But I think then we've also got to consider how that then feeds up into decision making at board level, corporate board, etc. So Mosaic is going to be a key transformational part for us. You know, we're reliant on that software. It would be good to get an update on these strategic IT programs, especially as we are focused on resource now.
Are colleagues content with that suggestion? I think that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, okay, so we'll do that as well. So we'll see if we can try to do that in January as well. We haven't decided yet what we're doing about the Thames Water and Environment Agency item. There was a flood wardens meeting this evening where I think they were going to have a discussion about predictions for this winter. I'm very conscious that this time last year we were being told we'd experience flooding before Christmas. And we're already at the end of November, and I'm not getting a sense of whether we're facing a difficult situation this winter or not.
Chair, I'm not aware, normally at this time, if the emergency planning team are really worried, we all know about it.
Sure.
And they haven't been summoning us into urgent meetings.
Yeah.
But I will go back to them and ask them where the water levels are.
Yes.
And see whether or not they can give any further information.
That would be helpful. And we did talk previously about drought as well. We're conscious that it's not just flooding, it's the drought situation. And we had the Section 19 report at our last meeting last November. Could I task you, if you're in agreement, Ms Lawrence, if you could go away and speak to the portfolio holder and your colleagues and get a sense of when would be a good time for us to look at this issue, particularly around Section 19, because that pertains to the council and its action plan. Obviously, we don't want to do that too soon or too late, but I think it would be good if we could do that around about March, April time. So if you could give us a bit of a steer about when you think that would be a good idea, Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, interesting. I think it was only last evening on TV, I saw a Thames Water advert for the region about all the development work they're doing. So common sense dictates to me that they've actually got something that you should be able to share with us that's fairly up to date and gives at least part of the answer to that question.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that.
If I might come back on that. So I've recently met with Thames Water and they're coming to the Berkshire Prosperity Board on the 18th of next month. And one of the things that they're briefing on is a range of upgrades to foul water treatment, and also they've got a groundwater development plan as well. So there has been quite a lot of movement, I think, over the last few months. The last time I spoke to them, they were dependent on funding, of course, and we know the challenges that are being faced there. But they have certainly, I think they will have updates that you would find very interesting to hear.
Good. Thank you for that. Good. Okay. Playing pitch strategy, we need to find a time to do that. Again, if you could guide us as to when that would be a good time, so that we could have a timely input. And obviously there were recommendations in the Sports Hub report about the playing pitch strategy, so we just need to factor that in and make sure that our recommendations are considered as part of that discussion. We've got pedestrianisation and waste strategy for March. And then the other thing I was going to mention, I shared with colleagues earlier today about the request that we had from Paul Morgan to look at delegated authority for large contracts of 2.5 million or over. I don't know whether colleagues had a chance to look at that. I'm conscious it was only this morning that you saw it. But just to outline his concerns, he pointed out that when Northcroft Lido and also the Sports Hub came before the council, there was quite a lot of information about the objectives for those projects. And he is concerned that we are not getting that level of information in the public domain now. They're being bagged together as delegated authority items that go off to a senior manager to approve behind the scenes, and we're not actually getting proper information about those projects. He mentioned Northcroft, Dryside and Graiseley as examples where he feels that we haven't had as much information as we would have had before the delegated authority situation came to pass. He feels we're only getting information about procurement, but not about the rest of the information that the public ought to be able to see. So my response to that would be that we should probably try and get a response from perhaps Councillor Brooks and Councillor Cottingham in the first instance. Ms Lawrence?
Yeah, so I think some of the projects, some of the larger projects that are set through the budget setting process through the capital programme. But behind all of those are full business cases which are available. So you know they are fully available. So we don't have delegated authority. We only have delegated authority up to a certain level, which is significantly. We've just changed it. I think it might be £50,000 now. Anything over and above that needs either a council or executive decision. And in the case of the budget, obviously that's a council decision. So I think maybe what might be helpful is for us a short paper to this committee, setting out the process in terms of how the budgets are allocated. And then obviously the scheme of delegation, but certainly there are no delegations to that level for officers. It's got to be a council or executive decision.
Okay, because this refers to delegated authority by a service lead or service director to proceed with contract awards with a value in excess of 2.5 million. I think there has been some confusion because I think legal said at the last governance meeting exactly what you've just said about how those projects of those values would have to go to full council. But this delegated authority does refer to contract awards with a value in excess of 2.5 million. And those are appearing on the executive forward plan as delegated authority, but without any information about what lies behind that.
Okay, I think maybe what would be helpful is just a briefing paper to come to you.
That would be really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chard, can you make sure that Ms. Lawrence gets a copy of that request for scrutiny from Paul Morgan? And then you can see exactly what it is that he said. And I think we also need to make Councillor Brooks and Councillor Cottingham aware of that request as well as a courtesy. Are members happy with that? Great, okay. So I think that brings us to the end of that particular item and indeed the end of tonight's agenda. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you for your input. I think it's been a really interesting and useful agenda. And I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the evening, what remains of it, and I will see you at the next meeting. Thank you.